But going back to Microsoft then, so what I understood it was basically saying anyone that uses ChatGPT and they integrate that into their application, they produce some text, and if that generation of text is based on something that ChatGPT has trained on, they are still not getting, or if they get sued, they will cover
with the
it.
specific of it being GitHub Copilot, not ChatGPT.
Yeah, exactly.
Really? It was only Copilot? Yeah.
Because Copilot is the one that is actually used at scale in organizations.
But a lot is using the API
Yeah,
for
exactly.
ChatGPT as well, right?
Absolutely, but it's a lot of
I would say-
individuals, not companies.
Yeah.
No, I would say right now it's ChatGPT all the way, that nobody's using Copilot because it's really bad at generating code compared to GPT-4 essentially. But of course, there's going to be a Copilot. There is a Copilot in sort of alpha beta that uses GPT-4, and that's going to be the thing. Of course.
Okay, so it announces new Copilot copyright commitment for customers.
But of course, and this is all about taking away uncertainty so we can start innovating. And because we have innovation paralysis because no one really knows the deal here. And I can also assume we need case law here. So Microsoft doing this is pushing people to try, and then we can have some legal action, and then we can be okay with that. But ultimately it builds up case law on these topics, I guess. Would you say it like that?
Have we started?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Case law is one thing, but isn't it about removing the uncertainty and the risk of getting sued and just having people?
Yeah, this is the number one topic. Yeah,
right.
This is the number one topic, of course. But the implication of removing it means that the real legal wheels can start turning properly. Yeah. Right now, they are sort of slipping.
On one side, on the sort of code generation side, and the sort of GPT producing, or in this case Codex model producing other people's code, that was relatively specific to that model. Nobody has shown that behavior in GPT-4. So it's a fairly safe thing too.
So if it looks grand from Microsoft, but when you start looking behind the surface, what are they actually committing to is not that big.
So I don't think it's the sort of the risk is on or the very big challenges are on that side. It's more on the side of what is IP, generated AI things.
But I guess also it's about moving the risk from the application side of things to the supplier of the AI model.
Exactly.
I guess the same can be argued for Tesla cars or something. Is it the manufacturer or the driver of the car that's getting sued? And who will cover the costs? And in this case, Microsoft as a supplier goes in and cover the costs and take the responsibility.
Exactly. Now, the big problem today is, or problem is that these tools give such a ridiculous productivity boost that people are essentially just wildly ignoring any type of rules and regulations.
But it depends. I mean, if you're a big enterprise or corporation, you don't want to take risks, especially if you're handling like personal data and sensitive data.
So I was at a talk to the conference with Andreessen Horowitz like 2 months ago, and this was particular for the game industry. And they had made a big survey of large studios, and there was I don't remember exactly the number, it was like 85%, somewhere in that range, were using GPT-4 for production code generation, so stuff that goes into production, which is like completely unregulated in terms of like what are the consequences, what are the risks, and so on. Yeah. But if you are a developer, it's like you're going out for milk every day, and there's this bike you can use. Nobody can see that you're using it.
Yeah, but I think the problem is if we also want to see that kind of like enhancement or development within the big corp, I think what we need is some clarity around regulation.
Absolutely.
Because it's just a gray zone right now. And especially that's what I sort of see is that, and basically the same challenge that we sort of had to deal with during the Peltarian days, to work with enterprises, but they couldn't really use the data that was the juicy data, and they couldn't really implement stuff in their core business. So I think we still have some way to go, and I think that regulation could actually be that sort of like butter.
It has to be it has to be somehow, because right now it's really there's a big disconnect between what expectations are on sort of enterprise level legal or risk management, call it risk management, and what's actually happening. But I think there are a bunch of on the generation. For instance, you can use Midjourney today to say like do a Mickey Mouse, and it will do it. That image, that thing, is no longer Disney copyrighted. Sort of, you use the AI to whitewash. Sure, Disney can sue Midjourney for infringing their copyright, but you're not. You're using the AI generated bit, which clearly isn't.
Yeah, but it's also the case because you can't really, at least if we're talking about like Swedish law, the sort of an idea is free and sort of a manner is free. So you can always like copy a style, but you can't copy a specific image. But then of course, if you have like specific features of it, then you're sort of like going into a trademark or sort of a patent situation.
What about the Mickey Mouse case? Sort of, you're not copying the Disney one, you're copying the public domain one that the AI has generated.
But the public domain one could be an infringement if it's a specific picture.
Okay, so that takes precedent that there is the sort of this thing that they have registered.
And I think, sorry, maybe you want to join the conversation here.
I'm not a lawyer. I'm married to a lawyer. For me, at least, based on what I know on IP and trademark and everything, like if I ask Midjourney to create a new logo for my startup and it looks like the swoosh from Nike, definitely it's protected. Like I can't utilize that even though it's created.
Yeah, exactly. And
it's a bit the same thing for me here. Like it's a line drawn in the water.
Yeah.
And in every case, you need to make a decision if somebody sues for images, especially. And for Mickey Mouse, if it looks like Mickey Mouse, sounds like Mickey Mouse, probably is Mickey Mouse.
Yeah, exactly.
By AI, and then Disney has a case.
Yeah.
But like in every legal case, like.
But I think it's important to sort of remember, and we were talking about this before, that it's sort of like we need to sort of look at the IP situation in two steps, because we have the training data. Yeah. In order to train the model, you sort of need data, and then you can't use copyright material if you don't have sort of consent to do it.
This is one problem.
So this is one problem, exactly. Yeah. But let's say you have sort of consent to do it. And then you have the model and generating an image. And then you have the next question. Okay, so this new AI generated image, who owns that one? And that is also unclear if we look into like Swedish law, for example.
On the first part, the EU law proposed, they have this fairly radical sort of the last revision that you could use copyrighted data as long as you cited it, sort of saying that I am using copyrighted data.
In the AI Act?
Yeah. That was, which is, I think, is super, super radical.
Okay.
That's news to me as well.
Yeah, that's news to me.
We're digging very deep into the legal questions of AI here. And I know, Evelina, you have to leave very soon. So I thought let's do a very, very brief introduction. And then we jump into more legal questions here before we have to leave. But let me start by, for one, saying I'm very happy to be back after a long summer break in the AIAW Podcast.
Yeah, I feel the same.
Henrik, awesome to see you again. Yeah, I feel the same. And Goran as well, of course. But especially, let's start with you, Evelina. Evelina Anttila, right?
Anttila? Oh my God, we've known each other for years.
Jesus, don't embarrass me.
Oh my God, you have like two Finns now that are like...
Anttila. Okay,
half a beer is not enough for you.
Yeah, Anders. It's like one of the most common surnames in Finland.
Really?
Just so you know.
I'm not Finnish at least, so I can blame me. Anyway, CEO of Wellstreet, right?
Yep.
I got that right. And investor and previous Peltast,
Yeah, exactly.
Working at Peltarian.
Guess that's the theme here.
Yeah, it's a Peltast theme. We have a set of awesome people here. But I must say also, I think you're one of the best legal experts in AI that I know of. So it's awesome to have you here for this kind of recap, I guess, of what's happened over the summer in AI. So awesome to have you here.
Thank you.
But with that, also, I'd like to welcome Luka.
Hello.
Awesome once again to see you here.
You're
also,
not even trying the last name.
let me try. Okay.
But your own first name, babe.
Was it wrong?
Yes.
Luka Crnkovic-Friis.
Friis, I can say that.
Friis, yes.
Yes. Okay. Previous co-founder of Paltorian, of course. Head of AI at King right now. And in my view, I think one of the best technical experts in AI that I know. So awesome to have you here as well.
And I must also say, I really have enjoyed following in the social media your commentings and rhetorics and butting in on explaining stuff in
Yeah,
a
you
very,
should do
very
that more.
Okay.
because someone who has the ability to actually know what's going on, several layers underneath the hood, and then in a very succinct way put that in a post, actually demystifies and clarifies a lot of the objects. So you've been doing that with the ChatGPT journey now, and I really appreciate that.
Thank you. I haven't logged into LinkedIn for 6 months now.
Maybe you need to go back then.
But it was
I miss
good.
you there, man.
And speaking of which, I mean, Oliver, you
Yes.
are great on LinkedIn.
I think
That's
this
my
is-
source of what's happening in data, what's happening in AI.
I must say so. So very welcome here as well, Oliver Molander. Got that right? I
That
hope.
was right. Yeah.
Also, I must agree. I mean, one of the top writers, I would say, and of course experts in AI. And all the posts that you write on Medium and LinkedIn is top of the line. It's awesome to see. I'm not sure how to describe you. You're entrepreneur, investor, co-founder of Validio, previous Heltast and Paltorian, or how would you describe yourself? What's the
Right now, focusing on investing, both in young companies, focusing on AI, ML data, infrastructure, but also application layer companies, and also now involved with more mature companies in data, which are profitable and growing fast. So not only startups. And I would call myself investor and enabler. I like to work with great founders and just help them.
And perhaps also an influencer in some sense, because the way you phrase yourself and communicate, I think, is awesome. So please keep that up.
Yeah, no, it's been an accident, but I hear more and more people thanking me for what I produce, and I feel a bit now that I'm becoming a bit stressed because.
Exactly.
Because before I was
Influencer.
I didn't care at all what I wrote. I just wrote stuff, and now it's actually, are people interested in hearing this? But I try to be this bridge between business and tech because I'm a business person by my background. So Luka naturally is the technical genius here, Evelina the law genius, and I try to add some value from business perspective, how the business works.
You wanted to monetize on their expertise.
Exactly. I'm like a football agent for the best players in the world.
But awesome. Let's keep the time that we have with Evelina here. We have 15 minutes more, and let's focus a bit on legal questions. And we started speaking about the interesting case with Microsoft that basically is covering anyone using Copilot. If they get sued, they will basically cover the fines. What do you think, Evelina? Is that a good way forward? Do you think this will be the precedent for however?
I'm not super sort of into all the details, but I mean, I think it sounds interesting, especially from the point of view that we discussed previously around enterprises or corporates starting to using AI, because I think that's one of the main challenges right now is to get sort of legal on board. However, I'm not sure if this would be sufficient for them. I think what we are missing still today is some kind of layer between sort of the AI models and the non-tech people that sort of need to make sure that the data is handled properly, that the IP is taken care of, that no sensitive data is going through. I'm not sure if it's just a commitment is
I think
fine.
That's a good point. It's not just the economical kind of
Exactly.
impact of the fine. No company wants to be sued.
No, exactly.
So-
it's a PR risk.
Yeah.
I mean, and as a customer, would you come back?
Yeah.
But could you elaborate what that layer is in your head?
Yeah, well, that layer, I would sort of call it like a compliance layer, which is basically, and I mean, just going back to sort of our war stories, when we worked with enterprises, for example, and we had we had our Anders and we had the other in the tech team. No, first of all, we had Oliver like selling stuff to them. And then we got them on board. And then we had a super excited like developer on the other side that wanted to use it within their businesses. And hopefully it was not just a POC that would go to the sort of graveyard. It would be a POC that could be used for real. But then it was always a big standstill from like legal and IT security. And we were like, we got pages and pages front and back with questions, and they wanted like basically, what do you say in English? Like hängslen och livremmar.
They wanted the belts and the bracelets.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, in order, because now we have this fast development, it's going, I think a big problem right now is the technology is actually democratized in a way that's no longer the competitive edge. And that's also why we sort of like pace is urgent.
Sorry, what pace is urgent?
Sort of the speed of pace.
Innovation pace to adoption pace.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think there could be a challenge and a risk for enterprises that they will sort of get behind because they have so many processes and structures internally that they can't start using AI for real. So I think we need a compliance layer or whatever that sort of can bridge legal, which is important, and IT security, finance, whatever, and sort of the technology.
So do you mean basically having like a sort of a framework of some kind that people can reuse or companies can reuse, or what do you mean with a layer in that sense?
Something that can make lawyers comfortable with the technology and sort of feel some sort of trust and confidence that data will be handled properly.
So some set of best practices in some sense from a legal point of view.
Yeah, and also, we have the upcoming AI Act here in the EU, and it will happen. It's just like a matter of time, and I think that's also perhaps the reason why there's still a wait and see.
Isn't it seriously out of date now?
I was thinking the same.
But they have updated it since the first proposal.
I know. It's gone through like first, which was like a very disastrous idea of trying to get LLMs as high risk category, which is like, no, you did it right. You did it by use case, which was like the correct. Why are you now doing it by technology? But seriously, I don't think like regulating credit scoring is like the world's biggest.
I think it's a problem if you try to sort of regulate the technology itself, because then definitely it will be outdated quickly. And also, I think we've had discussions before, you and I, Anders, about like the definition of AI and like, don't go there. Yeah. So I think the regulation should definitely sort of aim to cover consequences and sort of, and I think the sort of risk-based approach is reasonable. But still, yeah.
So where do we put in risk the world domination of AI and extinction of humankind?
Exactly.
I feel from a business perspective, like I can see a bit of a hangover right now when it comes to LLMs, especially the closed source ones. Because, like you said, Evelina, like I've been at startups as a founder, as an operator, whatnot, selling ML and data infrastructure in. And the requirements from enterprises are really high. So what I've heard now from companies in general is that, how do we actually adopt ChatGPT or any other types of LLM services and feel secure adopting it, because enterprises have requirements. And I think it's a bit too layered when it comes to the whole, how do we frame this? Because there's the one world domination, can AI do harm? How do we regulate so that it doesn't do harm? It's really hard. Like the bad actors don't utilize it freely. There is some kind of checks and balances in place. The other is, how do we actually regulate it in a way that enterprises feel secure in adopting it, so we can fuel this economical, expansion through AI. And I think there it's been interesting talking about what has happened during the summer. So OpenAI came out 2 weeks ago with enterprise ChatGPT. And the sole reason for it is naturally to boost their sales. And they realized that we can't just sell ChatGPT as it is to enterprises because we don't get true procurement.
But they are good at it. They have now the complete proper IT people, legal people, everything. So they went from being amateurs of like, oh, can we have your credit card, to be like fully enterprise compliant. Exactly. So it's been rather impressive quick change.
And that's interesting. I heard a podcast with the head of sales at OpenAI. So when you think about OpenAI, it's a bit mystic. You know, you think about something a bit out of this world. No, it's not. Like their sales team is very traditional. They use HubSpot. Like they got a lot of inbound leads when they launched ChatGPT. Very basic sales organization and software company. And they have the same issues. Like you go to a big Nordic enterprise, you're like, okay, we want to make sure you can use GPT-4 and ChatGPT everywhere. Well, they have to also talk with the procurement and with the legal team.
And with the security team.
And the security team and everything. And it's the same challenge there for them to actually be able to push through and sell it through.
But then you have also
before we move too far into ChatGPT and other things, let's try to make the best use we can of Evelina here before we move on.
But I think it's interesting. And I think I think it's interesting also, and I'd like to hear your view on that, Oliver. Because, I mean, the AI space right now, if you look at the startups, there's like, it's such a hype and it's a big, like, fluffy, I don't know, they're popping up like mushrooms. Yeah. And I think like the blue chip, the big companies, they could be the big winners. Because they have so many like legacy systems and processes and data, and they have resources, they have capital, and they could just like 10x their business with just like enhancing with the help of AI. So I think it's a bit unfortunate that there's still so many challenges.
For enterprises, you mean?
I mean, they have your the big thing now is that they have an ecosystem where your data is. So if you look at, have you seen the Microsoft Office Copilot? So you have Zoom, you have sort of not Zoom, Teams recordings, transcriptions. You have your calendar, you have your presentations, your Word documents, your SharePoint, whatever. Everything just ties into then GPT-4 can operate on. And it's a massive advantage because these models they are so context dependent. Give them enough context and they can do magic stuff.
Can we get back to that as well? Because I think the whole, deployment of generative AI in Microsoft with the Copilot and what Google is doing is super interesting. But it's also more of a product kind of, or engineering kind of question that would be super interesting to think more about. But taking the AI Act, and what you also said, Luka, a bit before, it started off saying we are going to be in Europe the first one that regulate AI. Yeah. Of course, we're not anymore, and China and US and so many more have already passed laws for doing that. What do you think, Evelina? Is it still the proper way forward for Europe to continue on the path of the AI Act, or has it been surpassed, so to speak, in what China and US are doing?
Yeah, but I mean, I'm not sure about the China and the US, and I think, when we have AI Act, it will be one of a kind. Yes, and the first sort of
good or bad.
But I'm optimist about like we being able to have two thoughts in our head at the same time, like that we can still sort of increase innovation and sort of support innovation, but also making sure that we don't violate like human rights. It must be possible. And I think actually that the EU, with its traditions and previous laws, is sort of a good front runner for that. And of course, there are super scary stuff. We have an upcoming election in the US.
Yes.
And we already know that the previous election did have a lot of like, it was phishing and misinformation and everything. So I'm super worried.
Excited or worried?
Super worried. So obviously there are several things that we need to regulate, and sometimes I hear that we need a law for AI, and it's not the case that we don't have regulation today that applies to AI. We do, but what we sort of see is that it's not adequate. Because this is a new technology that we haven't seen before, and sort of the harm that it can do, it's so much more exponential than previous technologies. So we definitely need something. And I don't think that, I do have my opinions about AI Act as well. And perhaps it's not great, but I think it could be in the same way that GDPR worked for us. And I mean,
but that wasn't perfect either.
No, exactly, but it sends
but the implementation was not.
But it sends a signal that this
I think AI Act is better actually than GDPR. GDPR was.
I think we learned some stuff. Yeah.
But it can't be perfect. That's so European. It's about killing risk, not managing risks to some extent. The mentality we have, and I think there are some good anecdotes in the technology world. I think one of the biggest industries, if you look at regulation, and they took big risk, was the aviation industry. So they didn't decide to regulate the aviation industry right away. How can you build planes? What are the regulations around planes? They just went through it and they corrected as they went. So I think Thomas Tungus, who is a famous AI investor and data investor, he just said like a good example is like, for example, at one point, all the windows in a plane were squares. After a while, they actually realized that square windows increase the risk of corrosion in the hull. And one plane came down at one point because of this. 200 people died. It's very concrete there when things go wrong. Like you see people dying. What did they do after that? Well, they put in a regulation that all windows in airplanes has to be around in order to minimize corrosion, for example. It's a bit the same thing here. I'm not a lawyer. I'm talking on a very high abstraction level here. But we can't expect to do everything perfectly. Like we need to move. And just correct as we move all the time.
I think trying to set up something perfect is impossible because it's moving so fast and it's just too valuable. And one of the difference between the sort of regulation, if you look at the Peltarian days, sort of the type of incentives we could offer companies didn't come close to them. Just let's throw the rule book out of the window. But this, when you have like overnight, you can get 50% productivity increase. It's just so, and then of course legal comes with this is this risk, this risk. But you can guess what company leadership says. We like 50% more revenue. Thank you very much.
Yeah, exactly. But what do you think about Max Tegmark's sort of?
What are your knowledge? It's already half past, so you can.
I have one thing. I just want to read up one thing, and this is a Reuters article about the EU Act, and they were talking about how they had added for ChatGPT clauses, and how they said companies deploying generative AI tools such as ChatGPT or image generator Midjourney will also have to disclose any copyrighted material used to develop their system. This provision was a late addition drawn up within the past 2 weeks, according to a source. Some committee members initially proposed banning copyright material being used to train generative AI models altogether, the source says, but this was abandoned in favor of a transparency requirement. Against conservative wishes for more surveillance and leftist fantasies of over-regulation, Parliament found a solid compromise that would regulate AI proportionately, protect citizen rights, and foster innovation and boost the economy, said blah, blah, blah.
But isn't transparency good?
No. But I'm saying that this is very radical, that you're saying that go ahead and train on copyrighted things, just cite your sources.
It is actually, right?
Yeah.
It's surprising.
I mean, that is, of course.
Send me the link.
Yes.
I need to look into it.
Yes.
I'm sorry. I need to do a...
Quick
I said
exit.
I wanted to do a French exit, not to mention that I leave, but now I leave.
Yes. Thank you very much, Evelina, for coming here for the short time you could. So awesome.
Looking forward to see you.
Yeah, great.
Yes, have a nice evening.
Oliver, please move closer to us.
Should we just continue for a short while on the legal track as well, just to close up the topic a bit? Because I think what you just said, Luka, is surprising, and it's nice to see AI Act can actually go for more, forward in a way that you don't even imagine. I mean, in this way, it's kind of revolutionary to say, break the law, it's fine as long as you say it.
Yeah.
Right?
You can think that possibly it's sort of thought of as two-step rocket, like let's first track all the infringement and then we'll come up with a licensing system, make sure that...
And I can extrapolate another reasoning here, like should the AI Act take care of this problem, or should they take care of the transparency, and then the normal copyright laws should take care of the copyright problem? Because otherwise you're going to have a lot of overlaps here.
Yeah, sure.
So I can live with that, because it's not like you're you're not off the hook. You're simply out of the AI Act hook into the normal copyright hook, in my opinion.
Yeah,
that's how I interpret, and I think that is actually quite.
But it does sort of. It's not a copyright violation to train a model on copyrighted stuff. It's like you have the right to read a book and memorize stuff without it being a copyright violation. In the same way here, you train on it and you don't store the actual training data. The sort of knowledge, abstracted knowledge, is in the neural network.
I think that's a good analogy, because if you think as a human, you can do certain things, and as a machine, what is the difference? If a human reads all of GitHub and every line of code that there is, it's perfectly fine. Yeah. They write something else that is inspired by that. That's perfectly fine.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think that this is the core of this is the crux. We are entering into problems that we could not foresee. Yeah. So basically, there's a legal problem here that it doesn't. So if I take your analogy. Okay, we can do it as humans, but here now all of a sudden it's like it's such a pivot in terms of how things could be done, so it doesn't really apply. And now I think that's the headache here. Yeah. So should we try to fit the new normal into the old dogma, or how do we rewrite the rule books on some of these stuff?
Also, when you have very, very much a moving target, you can imagine very soon that you could sort of abstract the stuff that makes the sort of what kind of data is required to make it reason, and add to that nearly infinite context depth, and then you didn't really need to have copyrighted materials trained on it. You just dump it into the context, and it's ephemeral.
Yeah, I mean, that type of extreme or thinking in the limits, as Elon Musk call it, I think is very interesting. So if you were to have a model that is trained only on non-copyrighted data, but you have an infinite context window, and you put in that data as a prompt rather than being trained on, what kind of law is then being broken? I mean,
yeah.
But I think what Henrik said, when it's split a bit, the responsibilities of the AI Act, for example.
Exactly.
I think at the end of the day, they need to make sure that the companies that produce the foundation models, there is certain level of documentation. We talk about black boxes. They can't be complete black boxes. They need to be able to document the architecture, the training data that has been used, because when something comes out from the system, it is productionized or put into the public, and then somebody sues someone. At least then, when you have the legal case, you can go back to the foundation model that was used to create that, and you can at least see. How was it trained? How does it function?
What if Spotify create a new recommender system and they see it as the biggest IP they have? Are they still required to produce the model card that describes exactly the data set, exactly the architecture and everything?
In theory, yeah. But if Spotify, I think one part of this, which is interesting with the AI Act, the EU AI Act, is that, let's be honest, there's only a certain amount of companies who have the knowledge, engineering power, data, and capital to produce these foundation models. There's not many in Europe.
What about non-foundational models, like a specifically trained model from scratch, so to speak? Should they also be required to produce all the metadata and documentation about the models?
I think in theory, yes. Like Twitter open sourced their recommender algorithm. That was nice. Yeah. But on the business side, naturally, like you said, a big part of the competitive advantage can be the IP you built. So I think if you get sued, you need to be ready to have it and to show it. I think that's the thing. Like if you twist the boundaries of the law, say Spotify does it, then they need to be able to show it.
But not having publicly.
No, not publicly, but you need to be.
Exactly.
You need to have it ready.
A good extension.
It's a good distinction here, because you are not here to make public your IP, but you need to be in a closed courtroom that is blocked out. Yeah. You need to be able to put up certain proofs.
Yeah.
And I think that is quite different to say that you're completely open with your IP.
I think this is a very sort of naive view of looking at like building codes. Building codes and things like that work because human can understand it.
Yeah.
Here we are getting into complexity that human can't understand.
Comprehend, yeah.
Which again, if we go to the legal bit, like intellectual property. What is intellectual? The whole idea is like it's human-centric, and the idea that only humans have intellect.
That's the starting point of the whole law, and now we are trying to put that law in a completely different context, and here is the problem.
Yes.
This is the core problem.
Yeah.
It's a human intellectual exercise that we are trying to apply to machines.
Yeah.
Can that be done even, or do we need to I mean, like then you need
just
to go
have to like wait a couple of years and then we'll just ask the AI for the solution.
but isn't that like if we're quoting isn't this first principles type you can only solve it if you back down from this angle down in first principles and then you engineer it what it needs to be here, because you cannot jump from here to here. You need to reverse engineer to the core first principles and then agree upon that, and then you can say where does it I mean, like I think we're trying to jump and that doesn't fly.
Yeah, I agree, and I think we'll get or already getting into an interesting discussion of what constitutes intelligence, getting a broader view. And it's not just like looking trends in society. It's not just when it comes to AI and human. I think there's much more recognition today about neurodiversity and diversity within humans, and that there are different types of intelligences and different types of seeing things.
And you can do a very simple analogy to a completely different, like a metaphor, a different topic. When we looked at the value or intelligence of the enterprise, since the 70s, the value of the company was measured only in one dimension, shareholder value, if I'm extreme. And now all of a sudden, with sustainability topics and all that, we are trying to look at companies and cost them out, measure them on more dimensions than pure performance metrics. The social dimensions. So all of a sudden now, actually in several fields in 2023, we are going down to the basics of how do we define value in a more multifaceted way? How do we define intelligence in a more multifaceted way? So the core denominator here is multifaceted.
Yes.
And multifaceted means now that we need to rethink our core models of this that was set in the 70s or 50s. If you go back to, your Friedmans and, I don't know, the economists of the world. So I think it's very interesting that completely two different fields in a way, but the same fundamental problem of how we define value or how do we find intelligence, singular or multifaceted ways.
That's a super interesting point. I would like to hear Oliver, the VC here, investor, on sort of that part. If we're looking at company value, sort of what's in the analogy, what's the sort of
what do you mean exactly?
Like for instance, if we take sustainability as an example, at least when you're looking at larger corporations, you sort of you have it as a core principle.
No, it's a difficult one, and you can look far into the future, but the danger there as an investor is naturally that you lose yourself and you lose returns, because as an investor, your job is to make returns. Yeah. If you have a fund, you make the returns for your limited partners and so on. But there are new funds who have different metrics for success, and it's not only shareholder value; it's actually impact and how much you change the world. Tacky to say, but to become a better place. And at the end of the day, the holy grail is actually how can we make it, make good returns on, making things better in the world. And that's the balance. But I think, look at Sequoia, for example, probably the most prestigious or one of the most prestigious investors in the world. Like they have a pretty simple view of this. They invest in winning companies. And winning company means that you get certain amount of market share, you increase the value of the company at the end of the day. And I don't think they put that much weight at the end of the day on the social benefits. Naturally, you can't do anything illegal. You shouldn't harm the world. But it's quite binary that if the company doesn't give returns to the investors, it's not a winner. That's the ultimate, deciding factor if the company was a winner or not. Did they increase in value and return money to the investors? And the big thing now that Nordsken and everybody else are naturally trying to do is that you can actually make a lot of money while, doing things.
And do we believe there is a slow moving shift here that we are having more than one metric? I really don't know. Because I'm not saying it's going to happen overnight.
I definitely know it's for larger companies, yes.
For larger companies, yes, I can say that too.
Yeah, I think what is quite telling is naturally companies who are selling ESG software and all of these tracking and reporting systems, they're doing really well right now. Despite the economical downturn, they're selling a lot.
No, but once again, it's another discussion on the trends or what happened through the summer or what have we changed. There is another upcoming law around sustainability reporting that really are making people scramble now because it's super complex from a data point of view.
Yeah.
You know, and here we have ESG reporting, and this is telling because we are getting to the point where we're going to get taxed on CO2. We're going to get another type of tax dimension. So when that happens, when that laws come through, the way we define profit and success, you know, it's going to be, you know, it's going to be a heavy. We're going to learn how to take the sustainability impact into the performance metric. I think that is a couple of years back.
If we're looking at that, and also I think generally in AI, you sort of have analogously 3 components. You have the pure performance, sort of economic incentives. Then you have a basic framework of law and regulation. And then finally you have, in between, you have this sort of culture, which I think, for instance, for a lot, at least larger companies, a lot of the stuff that's sort of really invested in, like sustainability, like diversity and things like that, they're not that hard regulated from the law side, but there is a cultural push towards that.
Exactly. And I think at the end of the day, you know, I'm a capitalist, but I believe that governments and higher institutions have responsibilities that are beyond companies, and companies are legal entities with shareholders. And naturally, you need to incentivize them to push so we can actually execute on these bigger, you know, concerns we have as a society, which is like our grandkids. They need to have a good place to live in. But at the end of the day, you know, just looking at companies in general, I always say, you're not loyal to the company. That's a legal entity. You're loyal to the people in the company. And legal entities, companies in general, like they need to produce shareholder value. Then it's the broader system around that needs to create the frameworks and incentives to them also to, you know, push the ESG part and everything, diversity, which are really important. But if a company is not doing well, it's close to going bankrupt, you're not thinking so much anymore about these things. You're just thinking about staying alive somehow. And there, in order, if you're in a situation where you're going bankrupt, but you know there are these higher level frameworks they need to abide to, then you naturally do it, despite, you know, being close to going away.
And maybe take us, I don't know if you want to continue, but if I'm trying to take us out of this rabbit hole, I mean, like we actually we ended up on this metaphor from the simple hypothesis that intelligence is starting to get multifaceted in the way we need to define it and measure it or act on it. And the analogy was, look at how we value companies, and we're needing to make a more multifaceted view of company value. So I mean, like, so back now, how do we understand multifaceted intelligence? What could that be?
Yeah, I think the language of intelligence needs to be developed. I find one of the most interesting things about the sort of past 6 months or so is that there's been a lot of declarations of it's this or that, without there actually being a definition of what this or that is, be it conscious or reasoning or whatever. So I think there's a lot of work being done there. So let me ask you a question. Do you think it is, and I do have an opinion on this, but do you think it's good to use the language of human psychology to explain AI functioning?
Oof. Yes.
You think?
I agree.
Good. I knew you would.
And what about all the concerns of anthropomorphizing? I can't say the word. Putting human feelings on machines. Aren't we going down that rabbit hole then?
I think this is a part of extending that language, of actually sort of making it multifaceted, that sort of these components aren't necessarily just human. That reasoning is actually a component that's independent of the hardware it runs on. And that in turn is, and also that these things are separable. That you have
go a bit deeper here, because you're losing me here, because the first topic, the question that Anders answered, I wasn't completely unpack that a little bit, so I follow.
If we should use the language of human psychology to refer to AIs in like more advanced.
And I think you two, you got it. Can you unpack, please?
Like, can I use words like reasoning? That is a typical.
I can continue as well, and of course, people get annoyed sometimes when using terms like consciousness, reasoning, intelligence, subjective, being objective, and so forth. And you can also think the type of psychology research that's been going on for decades and centuries. They have certain tests and way of working to explain how the human mind works. Before you thought that, okay, we can explain computers by looking at how they operate. You can look at the code. That worked before. It will be increasingly harder to do so going forward. And we will basically have a black box. We can understand the basic metadata or the map for it, but what happens inside every neuron will not be possible to understand. So we will come to a point where we will perhaps have use for the traditional kind of psychology experiments to understand AI as well.
And now I think I understand it, and let me testify, follow. So there's a lot of stuff going on in the brain, and we cannot use the normal surgeon type or biology type explanations anymore. We can know the chemistry of the brain, but going from chemistry to what is your soul or how do you think or something like this, there's a gap here. So then there's been a field in psychology for hundreds of years that is trying to find other methods of research as a way to understand and get therapy or fixing.
Finding the right abstraction level at dealing with complexity. It's like you see a dog, exactly. You sort of deal it on the object level. You don't do it on a chemical or physics level. Sort of.
And now this is the point, right? When you can't really look into the chemistry of the neurons to explain why I like my wife, then you need other semantics. You need other types of approaches.
Yeah. I'm eager to go to some ideas about what is really consciousness and how can that be described in a psychology set of terms.
But is this the AI update topic?
No, it's not. It's just us rambling.
We're just rambling now, guys. So maybe we should move on with the AI update.
Yeah. Should we go back to one of the topics? Max Tegmark and his talk during the summer. It's proper update, right? It's during the summer. And we haven't spoken about that before. Perhaps we can go around the table and just say, what did you?
I haven't heard it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Give the backdrop, and then we can.
Should I start, or do you want to start? If you
no, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I will bias you all when I say this, but okay. So he gave a summer talk, of course, and
the summer talk. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
He did sommarprat.
Yeah. Sommarprat.
Yes.
Max Tegmark gjorde sommarprat.
Swedish radio.
Yeah. No, I listened to them. I didn't listen to his.
Oh, you didn't?
No. Okay. Black box for me.
But he was very extreme. He went the AI doomer path and was rather, speaking about the existential risk for humanity of using AI, and he did that to an extreme. I respect him a lot. He's a very knowledgeable, well-known, and serious scientist. So that was, of course, very interesting to hear and listen to, and very informative in many sense. But when he says stuff like, will I will live for a number of years and I will go old, but I'm not sure if my son will. Can you find the quote there, Luka? I'm not sure if it's in that text or not, but he really went extreme, I would say, and went the alarmist path in saying that, it's not sure that my son will survive.
There it is. I think that AI that we're trying to build probably will destroy humanity pretty soon.
Yeah.
That's that's being I think
basically, and I'm sort of split on how to deal with this, because sort of there is a scenario that's not impossible. Where
it's not a non-zero.
It's exactly non-zero risk, but the risk is small.
Yes,
it's not on the level that you say, "Oh, I don't expect the next generation will survive." That's like missing 5-6 orders of magnitude of probability.
Is it like in the Oppenheimer movie when when they ask Oppenheimer, so what's the risk of,
Complete chain
completely,
reaction.
exactly, destroying the atmosphere? It's like, it's close to zero. Close to zero, it's like 0.0000001. I would like it to be zero. It can never be zero. If you ask, I'm not a researcher or scientist, but I know if you ask a researcher and scientist, can it be zero? It can never be completely zero.
Right.
Yeah.
But for me, I'm better trying to understand.
Did you listen to the talk, by the way?
No, I didn't listen to the full talk. I had some. I read some summaries on it, and I've heard several or seen a couple of different things. What I'm thinking about, and I'm really curious to hear your take on it. Why? What is the agenda? Why is he an alarmist? What has brought him to that? Or how? Of course, he has his opinions, and he's obliged. He is, and we think it's extreme, but he's a smart guy, right? So what has put him on that path? Does anyone have a background to this?
No. I think it becomes a bit personal, analyzing his motives, but
I
don't know.
Some thoughts about that, and I think for one, it's not an implausible, of course, conclusion that will happen. I think that I should say this properly.
That's how every good story starts.
Yes.
Maybe it's a stupid question for me. I was just
no, but there is a real chance of this, and of course, I think he wants to raise the concern and have people paying attention in the way it should to make sure that we have the proper regulation in place, just as Elon Musk wants to have that happening. And how do you really make people make a change? Well, you need to raise awareness of a potential serious risk. Now, should you go out of your way to say things that you may not really believe just to make that happen? Maybe yes, in some case.
Yeah.
Just as a moratorium, in the spring, when they asked for every tech company to stop developing AI more powerful than ChatGPT for 6 months, everyone knew that won't happen. But I think Max Tegmark, who was behind that initiative as well, actually said it rather well in one of the podcasts with Lex Friedman, where he said, all the companies today, they have a need to, follow the wishes of the shareholders and make sure that they make the right profits. And to say as a CEO, I will actually not release this model or this product right now because we haven't really properly tested it yet. It may have some negative consequences. That's really hard for a company to do. And that is really what we have seen now, that Google pushes out model perhaps faster than they wanted to, just because Microsoft and OpenAI did it faster. So now, how can a CEO still say that to shareholders without losing his position? Well, if someone is building an opinion in the, a public opinion saying, we need to really think about existential risk, perhaps it's more feasible, probable, and possible for a CEO to say, let's not rush this to production. You see what I mean?
Yeah, it's been there was I think it was OpenAI led by some obscure institute, sort of a very short coming after Elon Musk, which was we should treat artificial general intelligence as a potential existential risk, and it's comparable. And then it had a couple of things, not climate change though, for some reason. So I mean, the companies are aware of it. I think more than we're used to traditionally from companies. Yeah. So at least sort of from the OpenAI side, and certainly also from Google side, that there is this.
But maybe that's the point, right? So some people need to take the conversation to the extreme, sort of to wake up the public masses, the sleepwalkers.
Yeah, I think in general, like we have two camps on different dimensions, but I think on the AI destroying humanity, we have the camps there. Those who are talking about it loudly, and I think it's more that they have these platforms and they want to actually make sure it doesn't happen, even though they don't believe it will happen, but they see a slight risk. And they see that slight risk is enough for me to go out there and say that I'm afraid that my son won't live because the way we develop AI right now might destroy the world. And I can see the same if we go one, abstraction level lower, which is where I usually operate. I'm really bad at these philosophical questions about intelligence and reasoning. But if we go a bit down, what I see now, if we look at, generative AI, foundation models, LLMs in production, there's now two camps. There's a camp who are saying, actually, this is not so revolutionizing. We're going to have a big hangover. There's hype now, but at the end of the day, it won't be even close as big of a productivity boost as we think. There's Benedict Evans.
They're wrong.
Yeah, there's Paul Graham. I think Jan LeCun is a bit on that also side. And then there's the one who are saying that no, this will fundamentally change how organizations operate, how humans operate also. If we're honest, and I know this is very vanilla, I believe we're going to be somewhere in between. And I always say, and this is once again below the what is intelligence, AGI, I already said 5 years ago, we know that AI, or more specifically, not talking about AI, machine learning, is going to be huge. And this includes generative AI, it includes foundation model LLMs. It's going to be big when nobody talks about it, like databases. Like if we think about relational databases, now every startup that utilizes an API for, GPT-4 or Claude or whatever, they're suddenly a generative AI company, even though it's not the core. Did any startup in the 80s say we're a relational database company because they had a database? No. It got pretty boring pretty fast, but it's very foundational. Or a data lake or a data lake house. And I think a bit the same is going to happen here. It's not going to be a thing anymore. It's just there. And it's going to be there just like a database, a data warehouse, or data lake, whatnot. That's the way I see this moving in the coming 5 years. And then we have the cutting edge research. And that's where we push the boundaries, develop new things. But
I think what we have now is, and already where we are at the level, is that we're starting to automate human reasoning, and that's like a really big thing, because it's not sort of a one-step thing. It sort of builds on itself. It's and you can suddenly think sort of where you would have a human in the design process of solving a problem. You suddenly can go to these meta levels, which opens up so much, and I think we're really scratching the surface on it. I was just talking the other day to a sales guy from OpenAI, who was showing me the ChatGPT Enterprise, and he showed the sort of analytics tab, and it was like regular analytics, and he asked like, well, what kind of things would you be seeing here? And there were a couple of people there also from the development team and so on. And I said like, okay, but why don't you like ask the model, like use the model we should write that down. But this suddenly, when you're sort of have this intelligence that you can just plug in somewhere that can reason for you, it's something fundamentally new. Yeah, to some extent. I'm not there yet. In all honesty, I see it as a nice tool. It's a nice add-on for productivity, but doesn't automate that much yet in my life, at least. I utilize it. I try to test new things and see. But at the end of the day, because in my world, the value always comes from the last mile. Like 90% of the stuff when you build a company or start whatnot, the 90% anyone can do, it's more execution. Then we come to the last mile, the 10% extra that makes the company extraordinary. I still don't see that these models can produce that. We need humans. But if I take one example that you should be very familiar with, both from Peltarion and Validio. Take data connectivity. Like you have data sources that are messed up, and you need to build a pipeline. Yeah. And today you have to do a lot of work just trying to figure out what's where do you have missing data, how do things connect. Now you don't. You just throw in a GPT-4 and say like, here it is, you sort it out. And it does the connection. And there are like millions of these things that today require human design, human intervention of trying to...
But that there we come a bit to... The aspect I see here, it's still going to be human in the loop, because if you throw GPT-4 there, you talk about data connectivity, data pipelining, everything, and something goes wrong, somebody's still responsible. And when something goes wrong, you can't be like, nobody was GPT-4. It did the reasoning for me. Don't blame me. No, they're going to blame you. And that puts the responsibility.
Your database, the source can break. I mean, we have
Yeah.
software stuff breaking. That's not, and we have a way of distributing responsibility.
Yeah.
So I would say I agree and disagree to some extent what you're saying, Oliver. For one, I agree that humans should be in the loop, and certainly with the AI of today, that's the best way to use AI. And I still think humans can reason better than the AI of today, but it can go through a huge amount of data in a way, that's much more efficient than any human can do. So, combining the two is obviously the proper solution today.
100%.
Then if we think, in 10 years ahead and start to, do some speculation and philosophy on this, the big change with AI is it actually goes what humans usually is the best at: cognition, intelligence. Human sapiens, it means the intelligent, person. And when a new technique, which is not databases, which is not production lines, it's not as the whatever kind of book press or whatnot. This is actually something that is the core of what humans have always been the best at, which is cognition. And when that starts to become better than humans in cognition, it is something that is different from all the other technological kind of revolutions that we've seen in the past. But we're not there yet.
Yeah, I was about to say, you're speculating. It sounds,
Yeah, have you, Anders? Have you done some coding with? That's a very
amazing.
for those that haven't. It's an interesting exercise because in a way, it's brilliant. It's a genius, and in another way, it's so dumb. So you have a combination of trying to coax it to do what you want, and it can fail on relatively simple cognitive tasks, like getting into repeated things, like you're trying to explain it. But at the same time, it can produce very complex code at a very very high.
And obviously, the high-level reasoning is missing today in ChatGPT, and that is a clear.
But it was a kind of an interesting transition going from. So I started coding with 3.5 and found that it wasn't worth it. It was sort of the frustration was bigger than the benefit.
Yeah.
And that flipped with 4 when it's actually
Did you try the Copilot chat functionality as well?
No.
So I played quite a lot with that during the summer. So the chat also, besides actually doing code completion, also allows you to ask any questions about a part of the code. So it has the context of the code you have written, and you can ask any question around it, and that was a huge positive experience.
Question to you guys here. In this podcast and in general, we talk a lot about OpenAI, GPT-4. So we talk about updates from the summer. One thing which I feel is really interesting now, and it's something I discuss a lot with founders, I think about it a lot myself, is open source versus proprietary closed source models. We had the Falcon 180B that came out. We had Facebook's Llama 2. Yeah. And in general, now the discussion is, besides the privacy part, besides being able to deploy it in your own environment, all of this, but what I see, I've seen this myself, and what I hear is naturally that for very specific tasks, actually utilizing a open source model and training it on or fine-tuning it on really good data that you have, it performs better for that task than GPT-4. And my question is, have any of you guys tested out and fine-tuned any open source models out there for specific tasks?
And sort of the experience, and this is kind of interesting because, again, talking about OpenAI, they are pushing now GPT 3.5 with fine-tuning.
That's interesting.
And their claim, and that's what also I've seen from open source models, is that if it's a very specific problem, you can get sort of parity with GPT-4 on that.
Yeah. And it's cheaper, and it's in your hardware. There's
cheaper can be discussed. Yes, then 4. Yeah, absolutely. Then 4. 4 is expensive. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Right now.
Yeah.
But that's another question that we can argue. If you've seen the articles coming out in the last couple of months, it's also been that the performance of GPT-4 has potentially gone down.
Yes.
It would be fun to hear what your reasoning about that is. My theory is more or less that they need to reduce the cost of the inference of GPT-4. It was probably this big, 16 or 8 times 120-ish billion parameter models in this kind of mixture of expert setup. But to run inference on that all the time is still far too expensive.
It is.
So I think, given all the users they have, they need to find a way to distill the models into smaller parts.
Yeah.
And that is why we're seeing in some tasks, I would guess, I'm guessing now, of course, that performance of some tasks has gone down.
I have another guess, and I have absolutely no inside information on this, so this is just a pure guess. So one interesting data point is that Bing performs better than vanilla GPT-4 on certain cognitive tasks.
Really?
Yes. Well, my theory is that they've through system prompts and through sort of the control tied it down, sort of given it so much directions on what to do and not to do that it is a bit locked.
So the human alignment part of the GPT-4 is stronger.
Yes, exactly. And I think since what I know is actually that the base model, although the fine tuning is identical on both, so it's just the prompting.
Yeah,
what's happening before. And if you spend some time with those, I had somebody posted on Slack a beautiful example. They were sort of saying to ChatGPT, so GPT-4 OpenAI version, how much is 5 plus 3? The answer is 8. My wife says it's 7. No, I'm sorry for the confusion. I think your wife is mistaken. No, my wife is always right. Oh, I'm sorry. You must be right. Sure, it's definitely 7. Apologies for giving you the answer.
Which one was this?
So this was OpenAI's ChatGPT.
Yeah.
Bing first no, you're wrong, and argued this is math. This is not a question about opinion. And then it started giving marital advice, how you can talk to your wife.
That's valuable.
Oh, that's valuable.
And then it's the same model. They've just been primed differently.
But can I pick up on Oliver's intro here, because I think we brushed it over too fast. You know, there's been a lot of different takes on open source LLMs versus closed source. Could we sort of a little bit summarize and unpack? You started with some major open source setups coming up, and there's been an ongoing debate, and Jan LeCun is pushing, and Facebook they're pushing stuff, and so where are we at that? Can we see some sort of can we see some implications? Can we see some trend where it's leaning at? Can we draw some conclusions?
Yeah.
So I mean, it's a fantastic initiative what Meta is doing, and I think the development of the open source models is super exciting. Initially, when they were released, it looked very quickly like, okay, this is going to be the way. The sort of
exactly almost like the
there is no mode.
Exactly. That even Google came out with their memo.
Exactly.
Which it's interesting because it changed. It's
but
changed
what happened
a bit.
now? Because that was almost over exaggerating.
Yeah.
Where are we?
There is still this annoyingly big gap to GPT-4
performance. Yeah.
So that's. So
I think exactly that's been at the end of the day, what matters the most? Performance, latency, inference speed, all of this that matters a lot, and cost a lot. And I think where we were, I've changed my mind during the past 9 months since the public launch of ChatGPT, and I was still in February, March. I was like, it's not going to be one big model; it's going to be many small models that are going to be open source, and then we have the big models. My take now, where we are right now, and this can change, is that it's going to be a bit the same dynamic as the cloud. So we're going to have what I call the big brain models. And these are generalist models, which are really good, like GPT-4, you have Anthropic's Claude, and so on.
We even use the word foundation models.
Yeah, foundation models, exactly. And then we're going to have this long tail of the open source models, and there's going to be good ones and not so good ones.
Will they be more specific, tailored for different types of use cases? Or
I think the gist with open source right now comes a bit down to cost and speed and security. So what I've been talking when I've been speaking with enterprise managements and boards and everything, I always say at the end of the day, if you have concerns about giving your data to OpenAI and how you can deploy it, just try out an open source. Llama 2 is really good right now. Like a text summarizing. Yeah, it's good enough, But where open source becomes really interesting and even the general results right now in the public is for very narrow specific tasks.
With extra data, of course.
With your high quality data, you can fine tune it with.
It's a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
That thing. In one way, yes, you don't send your data to OpenAI or Microsoft or Google.
And the cost aspect also.
Absolutely, and the cost aspect. But at the same time, you take on a legal risk of having something that's been trained on other people's data.
Yeah.
When you're using a third-party provider, then you just, it's been
them.
It was them,
yeah.
It was them, not us.
Yeah.
But have you landed in some rules of thumbs? I mean, like how if you were to advise someone on when to go open source or how to think, we are almost going in that direction, how you are thinking.
Yeah.
I'd like to hear all of you if there's some rules of thumb here, how to think if someone wants to try out the different approaches, when to go where.
I think cost is the biggest thing, but in that case, a cheaper version of GPT is actually competitive and is sort of cloud cutting costs. So it's
because it's a little bit like you're going the enterprise way rather than the open source way. Can you say it like that?
I think it's actually the opposite a bit. That enterprises can more easily go open source.
Yes.
Smaller companies who don't have the engineering talent and the data who want to get results fast, they go.
Okay.
It's the on-prem versus cloud.
Yeah.
Almost, right?
Yeah, it is.
I fully agree.
Yeah. But Luka, you're at a big famous company driving the whole AI strategy. Like, how do you perceive it?
So we have an AI Labs team that has been looking very testing open source models and seeing how they work. And there's this really annoying gap between that and
because you've done the real POCs here, and you've done the performance.
Yes.
You're benchmarked.
But I should add this, that what we the stuff that we're looking at, the sort of really modern stuff. Is that productivity enhancement.
Exactly, that's
And there's a big difference then when you have the cost for 2,000 people or 20,000 people versus having 600 million.
Yeah.
And for us right now, using, like for instance, personalization, that's one big thing in games. You want to give each player the optimal experience. So instead of doing some centralized reinforcement learning based thing, why not add a LLM agent to each player that learns to get to know them, everything that they do, and that communicates with some other LLM expert that know how to produce levels and so on. The problem is that it's like orders of magnitude too expensive.
More expensive, yeah.
But it's prohibitively expensive.
Exactly.
Because you're now dealing with this one, the 600 million license.
Yeah, exactly. So what I've heard speaking with investors and their portfolio companies who are implementing more in a productivity aspect, not external services, but more internally. Yeah. They've been saying the same. Like with Falcon, they actually, when they're fine-tuned it, they manage to get good results that they feel happy with. But at the end of the day, GPT-4 performs better, and it's that little difference that annoys you. Yeah. And that's a bit the threshold right now for many of the startups and scale-ups.
It depends on the application. I mean, if you just want enterprise search, like navigating in your company's data, then a lot more primitive work. While for coding, for instance, then you really want the of brightest AI you can find.
Exactly. Yeah.
What is your take on this, Anders? Do you have any rules of thumb here?
If you need high security, the question, it's not even a question. So then you have to go open source, of course. But I'm still. I certainly agree with what you just said about the gap to GPT-4 because it's amazingly good and no one says it's better, even if you look at the latest research papers or even what Google themselves is saying, we're not up to Google or GPT-4 yet, but they have the Gemini thing that they say is potentially 10 times better and we'll see about that.
10x again?
Yeah.
Okay. Have you used Claude by Anthropic?
Yes.
I think it's pretty good.
It's sort of 3.5 level.
Yeah,
which is good. Good. Yeah.
Where are you going, Anders?
Yeah. So it is. I'm saying that it's annoying that OpenAI and GPT-4 is as good as it is. The thing I'm still also lacking. If it's true, all the rumors that's been going on over the summer that it is some kind of mixture of experts with a set of 8 or 16 different models that are specially trained for different tasks. it sounds plausible. That's exactly what Google is doing with Paul model. So it's probably correct. But why isn't there a single open source model that does that? Google has it, Microsoft has it. I haven't seen yet an open source version of it.
Let's see if Google comes out with an open source version. It would fit their strategy, and it's a way to compete with OpenAI.
More hopes for Meta to do it, but we'll see.
And it is annoying. Because in the world of enterprise where you do have sensitive data, OpenAI is a new player, so there is. But I can imagine, Anders, in sort of when it take it to the next level to actually
Apple level.
Yeah. Annoying. All of that information, and this can be used really to dig into it, but you can't because it's not secure.
Yeah.
But still, I guess it goes also to the question of the moat, and I'm not sure if we should go there instead. Because
I think we should. I had a question almost in my head. Is it only generative AI this summer? Is it only LLMs? Is there anything else interesting to talk about?
Diffusion models as well. Did you see? Have you tried the IdeoGram, the text generating?
I have not yet, actually.
It's fun. You can generate text. Just remember, everything that you do is public. So,
But talking about that, so Andrew Ng had a presentation at Stanford now, the future of AI. It was an interesting slide that I actually shared on LinkedIn, and this is something I talk with business leaders about. And there, we had these different circles. One was generative AI, and then you had traditional machine learning and reinforcement learning. And then there was another ring around, which was what they expect the market size to be in 3 years. And what Stanford and Henry Ng said was that traditional, aka boring, machine learning, it's still going to be in 3 years so much bigger than generative AI. Like you said, we're only talking about it.
We forget what is bread and butter here.
Exactly.
A little bit, right?
And what I'm speculating, are we going into a traditional machine learning winter right now? Where nobody focuses on it and we don't progress.
I think those are two very separate things. I mean, as I mentioned, if we take like personalization for games at the scale at King, LLMs are prohibitively expensive. It's not possible. Yeah. While traditional machine learning can provide fantastic results.
I love when you say traditional machine learning.
Which is deep learning now.
Which is deep learning now.
That was the joke. You stole it. Exactly. Because we were sitting on this pod and we're talking about traditional machine learning versus deep learning, right? Yeah. And now deep learning is traditional.
Exactly. That's good.
It's so fun. How is that 1.5, 2 years ago? So traditional machine learning, when we talked about this 2 years ago, what was that? Regression, random boost, and then deep learning, right? Yeah. And now all of a sudden, most of the deep learning stuff is now traditional towards the LLM stuff.
And I think it's important to say, because it's an annoying question that I get a lot as well. Why not simply use an LLM for X, Y, and Z?
Yeah, come on, let's really kill
I think we should be clear that generative AI is fantastic. It is going to change a lot of jobs. But it is different. It's not replacing, it's simply different, and it will add new use cases for AI that hasn't been possible before.
Yeah.
But the use cases that did work for even rule-based systems or traditional machine learning or traditional deep learning is still around, super useful.
And I mean, LLMs, just like humans, tend to be really bad at the problems that traditional machine learning is good, when you have massive amounts of data.
Yeah. And this becomes so annoying when we don't do fit for purpose.
Yeah,
the hype train is so stupid. It's ridiculously stupid. And we talked about this on the pod, and I want to test you if you feel that trend is coming. If we can come back here, that the risk with so much hype in one particular space is that it's eating up the money that could be spent more wisely.
I wouldn't, if I was doing a startup now. I wouldn't touch traditional machine learning with a 6-foot pole, because it's so much.
But then it's the winter.
Yeah, it is, but it's also the sort of explaining.
Yeah,
is far harder of the benefits of a specific model applied to a use case versus the sort of general magical box that.
But the problem is the real people working in the real world, in normal companies. Yeah, they get fucked by this whole conversation when they should really get on with the problem.
Don't they just do their machine learning that they're doing?
But do you know what I've heard on that?
The budgets get cut. Yeah. The teams gets reduced. Yeah, that's what I mean.
But you can go. So what I've heard, I saw some statistics. The pressure on applying generative AI. So it's they did this big survey, and it's on different levels in companies: board members, management, and then people in the middle management, and then individual contributors. And it's the board, like they are pushing the most. Like 70% of board members are pushing, how are we utilizing this? How are we applying this? So they can say, and then the second was naturally the management. And I think it's interesting. Look at Klarna, for example. And I have a lot of respect for Klarna and Sebastian and everything they're built. But it's very interesting to see the discussion that Sebastian is now driving, is how they're utilizing generative AI within Klarna and the results they're seeing. I'm not questioning them, but knowing, I've been deep diving back into the years into fintech and looking, what they use. It's a lot of traditional machine learning you do when you do fraud detection, when you do all of this stuff. And that's the bread and butter.
But I haven't really seen any cut specifically there. On the contrary, sort of everything gets mashed into the AI bit. And those that are not doing generative AI, they are taking their existing machine learning bit. We're doing AI as well.
So they're riding the hype. So hopefully that sort of smooths it out a little bit.
Exactly.
And one fun thing I've heard is like when the board is like, and then the management comes, okay, how are we using generative AI? So what I've heard that sometimes what they do is they utilize, foundation models to make it more smooth to utilize traditional machine learning. So like say if you want to transform semi-structured data into structured data, there you can use a foundation model to do that, and then you put it into a traditional machine learning model, and then you can say, we're using foundation models or generative AI. We're using it. What they're doing, they're using it to apply it then to their traditional machine learning models.
But look at our dear Beltarian platform.
Yeah.
I mean, what could you do there that you can't do now with GPT-4? You can get it to load your data, clean your data, suggest a model, build a model, start the training,
exactly,
do nice plots and so on.
Yeah.
So there is this, and I haven't seen a lot of it yet, but I guess it's going to come exactly that with LLMs helping to build traditional machine learning.
Yeah,
that's interesting. That's what I've been looking into, how LLMs will actually transform data transformation, data wrangling.
A data science profession as such.
Exactly, and how the cliche that data scientists put 80% on data wrangling and 20% on models, how they can change those numbers to the other way, that LLMs can take part of the boring stuff.
And I guess if we can have large language models that can actually generate code in general, which is exactly what data engineers are doing, and backend engineers are doing, and front-end engineers are doing, and every kind of system engineer is doing, that basically says, okay, it can do all of this stuff. It can basically do anything that the machine can do soon. And that is like another level of, use of AI. You use AI to build AI in some sense, right?
And maybe that is the trend that is the big trend underneath the surface here. Because when we start adopting this, maybe the 10x is that we have one programmer who can do the work of 50 programmers. You still need a programmer to sort of supervise it and drive it. But it's going to be a little bit like, in the Industrial Revolution, we were automating muscle power, and we moved from people working on the conveyor belt to design the conveyor belt, monitor the conveyor belt, so to speak. And if I take that jump into we are going to
but there is a difference. There is a sort of big difference in psychology. When you're looking at that period, what people were driving then was primarily profit. Right now it's growth. Meaning that it's less about letting go 49 people and keeping one, but it's like, how can we grow 50x for better or worse? I mean,
that's an interesting difference in dynamics.
Should we try to, the time is flying by, perhaps move to another topic and try to keep it as well to the theme a bit at least about, what's happened during the summer.
I have one topic.
Okay, yeah, please.
It's going to be short because I haven't actually finished reading the book, but there is one by Mustafa Suleyman, one of the founders of OpenAI. Founders of DeepMind. And what I thought was, I've just read the first few chapters. Let me just find what the book is called. It talks obviously about LLMs and what that has been, but in parallel talks about what's happening on the biotech front. and how like you can get a DNA printer today for a few $1,000, and that the cost is like dropping. And what happens when those two technologies intersect, where we have this sort of very two basic fundamental things like intelligence and just life itself. So that was it's called let me see,
So it's something about
the coming wave.
Becoming wave.
Yes, it was just released not long ago, but it looked promising.
No, I haven't heard about it.
No, me neither. It's the bookmark it.
But I guess that, when you start to use AI for other things, combining with these kind of multidisciplinary topics, using it for medicine or biotech, I mean, this is really where we start to see big impact happening, right? Yeah. Did he go any further into some examples, or?
So he was sort of both talking about sort of that we're encountering level of threat and level of opportunities that we haven't had earlier, and sort of how to deal with it. And the sort of threat example was that in theory today you can have one person can kill off a significant portion of humanity by,
I guess, developing a new coronavirus.
Exactly that kind of thing, that the technology is out there, and sort of that there are big implications on the way we think about both opportunities and threats.
Wasn't it some paper like a couple of months ago that they tried to use AI to produce some medicine, and they basically tried to have some kind of objective function for the AI to try to make sure that it was of benefit for the human, and they simply added a minus sign to the objective function saying it should be bad for humans, and suddenly it started to produce these kind of the worst chemicals, that are the most deadly you can think of for the humanity. And it actually created a well-known, the most deadly poison you can think of by itself. And starting to use AI to make humans that have bad intentions more powerful can lead to potentially very scary outcomes.
Well, I think the sort of realistic scenario is not... It's not Max Tegmark's, it's more Oliver's airplane story. Like, bad things will happen, but they won't be end of the world bad. It will be bad, and then we'll regulate. And then something else in another dimension will happen, then we'll...
Yeah.
It's going a bit back to that question about, the extremist, alarmists, AI doomers kind of thinking, which is, of course, good to try to wake people up. But I think it's bad for a number of reasons. And one reason is exactly what you said, that it basically hides the real threats that we have today in some sense. We have threats today of stupid AI, which is not that stupid, but it's not the super intelligence that we may have in a number of years. But even the stupid AI we have today in the hands of bad actors can be really, really scary.
Yes.
If you use it for autonomous weapons, if you use it to
chemical warfare,
to build a new coronavirus that can be even deadlier than before. If you use it for economical purposes and suddenly can crash a stock market or whatnot, these are things that can be done today with the AI of today, and you don't need super intelligence or AGI to do it. And if you just speak about this kind of long-term potential existential threats in the future, it may hide the threats that we have already today.
Yeah,
it blurs the focus on where we need to really put our regulatory attention to. Or
exactly.
That's an interesting one.
What do you think about, guys? Think about misinformation. That was one of the sort of ever since like GPT-2. That's been like, oh my God, we're gonna get flooded with fake everything. I've always sort of thought like humans have no problem lying on their own, and we've been able to like copy things quite well before.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I agree with you. I don't understand the debate. At the same time, I'm like, what creation is the best bullshit artist? It's the human. It's not an LLM. It's the human. At the end of the day.
But I think that opens up a quite good angle on this. So we have the alarmists who sort of really have the AGI style human extinction, which is okay. But then we've had another group of people that started driving the what they call the AI dilemma. Have you followed that? There's someone who made you can Google the AI dilemma, and basically they outline the problem with AI by simply extrapolating what we learned from the social media dilemma. And you know, they made this Netflix movie documentary where they explain, you know, the problem, and then they do a very eloquent storytelling on, you know, if we now understand how AI can be used, you know, that we are setting ourselves up for some real troubles here. But that trouble is not, you know, AGI extinction problem. It's not the Tegmark problem. It's a much more, in my opinion, real problem. Yeah. You know, how it's used for misinformation, how we simply lose track of many different things of how we want our society to work. Yeah. And to me, the alarmist conversation actually hides those things that are really real and need regulation now.
Concrete, yeah, I agree. I think we lose the sight of the important things which are happening now that we need to discuss now.
There are things we need to fix and regulate now.
Yeah.
That is sort of not being in the spotlight because we are talking about something that is potentially super intelligent.
Or actually, I remember my biggest gripe with the sort of the GPT-4 self-censorship and these things is that it refuses, and it used to be worse. They've tuned it now, so it's better. But it refused to write anything that was slightly rude or dark or something like that, which humans are like very quite capable of doing. Like it's not a problem, but rather it's the sort of when we get to the scale of subtle manipulation. I guess that's the sort of the biggest difference between the just traditional spamming is that you can really more target and make more.
I think that's an interesting discussion, and some people have tried to evaluate, you know, what are the biases of GPT-4? Are they moving in some kind of political direction, leaning left or right or whatnot? There are some ideas about that. We have other large language models being produced from China, for example. Before they were banned by the state, but now we have the Baidu's ErnieBot, etc., that is available. And then you can question what are the biases that they were potentially forced to encode into that model. We don't know, but
But the funny thing is when you get to the intelligent, sort of more intelligent one, like a GPT-4, is that in some ways it transcends bias because you can instruct it either to be biased or not to be biased. It knows the concept of bias and it follows your instructions. So.
But you said, you know, Bing potentially were less biased, right, or less human aligned, or correct.
So that Bing has typically been less instructed to be politically correct and sensitive to human sentiment.
Give marital advice instead. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. It can be quite rude. Also, it's like
yes,
but it's sort of the whole bias thing, which is a really big thing, I think, for traditional machine learning models that perform a classification, something like that. Here you have something that you can steer. You can actually tell it in the system prompt, in the instruction, make sure that you're not racist, that you're not sexist, that you're not, and make a check before you write your answer. And it's going to do it, even though its data set is obviously biased because it's a real world data set with all the biases that are there.
Yeah.
But what about like Elon Musk claim that, you know, he doesn't like GPT-4, for example, because he thinks it's too biased and he's going to build a truth GPT or whatnot? Do you buy into his ideas, or?
I think at the end of the day, like we're now at a higher abstraction level, which my analyses are not so good. But I think talk about trends, like I saw Gartner's hype cycle that I hate. I think it's like, but I like that they had like data-driven AI is like now in the first, like going up a bit. I'm like, data-driven AI.
What is that?
Well, I guess the data-driven AI philosophy is well, when we guys worked together, we weren't very, the imperative wasn't the data, it was more the model and working model. You had the Kaggle data scientists, they take a fixed data set and they use these fixed data sets and they focus on the models, just tinkering on the models. Actually, the log set with data-driven is that it's not the model anymore that matters. That's commoditized, which it is, with LLMs and the transform architecture and everything. It's all about the data.
Yeah,
But let's have a look at the Gartner hype cycle for 2023. I think it was released less than a month ago, right?
It's down there.
It's simply
So there you have data-centric AI.
I was roasting it quite hard when I was reading it. I thought it was funny how they looked at it, but it's interesting. All the hype words they could push into this.
Where are NFTs?
Yeah, but I love like generative AI, peak of inflated expectations. It's like, look at the Nvidia stock price. And you don't have to be a genius to be like, we're at peak inflated expectations. Then like data-centric AI, innovation trigger.
But how useful is this in reality? Because we're just taking a bunch of different words and different topics with AI in front. Does it make any sense even? I have a hard time making sense of it because you have prompt engineering, which is a subset of generative AI. What the fuck, man? And then you have this. So it's all over the place, in my opinion.
It's just one good term there that I see: neuromorphic computing.
I saw that one, and I was thinking about you when I read it.
No, but let's be honest, like the Gartner hype cycles.
But you don't even have, where do you have? If you have neuromorphic, you should of course have quantum computing. It's not even on the.
No.
So neuromorphic is more AI oriented than quantum. Why does neuromorphic sit on this?
Okay, this will take 5 minutes to explain it. But I think there is some serious. Perhaps it could be a topic. What is missing in today's large language models? Before getting to some proper AGI that we see there as well.
What is missing? Like, well, we know they hallucinate
or AGI, or what do you mean?
But humans do that as well. You can claim that humans hallucinate quite a lot.
Absolutely, 100%. That's a very good question. And at the end of the day, like if we take these big brain models, GPT-4, fine. But at the end of the day, if you take, say, an open source Llama 2 and you fine tune it with really good data for a specific narrow task, it won't hallucinate almost at all for that task. I think the hallucination problem also, I think to some extent, like the discussion now around LLMs or foundation models, we focus a lot on these big brain models, which are revolutionary. But now that finally OpenAI comes out with, the fine-tuning possibility for GPT 3.5, that's the interesting part. That's where, we get the next phase of producing value in productivity and specific tasks when you can do that.
I can just give it. I'm trying to formulate myself briefly, but it will be difficult here. But I think we are taking a brute force approach to try to build AGI today, and the brute force approach is simply to have large language models. I think it's a rather stupid approach. It's interesting and really impressive that it does work, but it's not the most optimal one to do so. And I compare it to, there was a mathematical proof called the universal approximation theorem that says even with a single hidden layer in a neural network, you can approximate any function, including the human brain and whatnot. So that's like proven mathematically. It's just that it is completely impractical to do so.
Exactly, it doesn't work in practice.
No. And I would say, we then have much more complicated models than a single hidden layer neural network like a transformer network that is much bigger, still, extremely big, which this kind of hidden layer should be also, as well. It should be infinitely large. Now we have super big transformer networks instead. They can, in principle, do more or less anything. It's just that it's not very practical to do so. If you look at the human brain, it doesn't have only these kind of perception capabilities. It does have a higher level reasoning. It does have a working memory in place. It does have some kind of configurator similar to the mixture of expert kind of models. We can easily see, and I'm going a bit into Jan LeCun's kind of JEPA paper now, where he clearly says, he also says things like these large language models are stupid. We can do much better. And I think, going to the neuromorphic computing would be one step towards this.
Do we have to? I mean, if you're looking at the sort of state of LLMs now, if you look at sort of cognitive capability, how much more is needed to sort of reach human level? And if we're fairly close, why not just push that final bit and then just let it optimize itself and solve the problem?
Let me steelman myself, or rather, I shouldn't steelman, I should strawman myself, speak badly about myself now. If you take Tesla and the latest version 12 of their full self-driving. I'm not sure if you've seen the version of this. Have you heard about that version?
No.
So what that version does, which is different from the others, they have perception models that do all the cameras, and it can visualize that in what Elon Musk called the vector space. And then given that vector space, it makes a number of decisions in either to accelerate, brake, or turn. Now, they had a number of basically rules saying if there is a traffic light, do this. Yeah. It was added on top of this perception model that they had. And they encoded a huge number of these kind of manually added rules saying if there is a zebra crossing here, you should do this. If you see that, you should do that. And they basically come to the conclusion up to version 11 that this is not scalable. So now they're not only using AI to do their perception, but all the rule-based kind of thinking or reasoning is also now in an AI model. So in version 12, which is not even released to the current cars, but Elon has access to it, and they had some videos that's displaying it. That mod has never been said that this is a lane of a road. There is no human information about this is a lane. This is some kind of line in the road that says this is the right lane. There has never been anyone that says this is a traffic sign. Yeah. There's never been anyone that said to the model that this is another car, this is a human. Everything of this kind of what the objects are and how you should act when you see that is learned.
That's really cool.
Yeah, because until very recently, self-driving cars you had the perceptive elements that were done by AI.
Yes.
Like, there's a bird there. Yes. But then they were rule-based, essentially.
Yes, exactly. So in that way, I think you can, if you go back to this, say that, yes, why not simply put a super simple objective, like saying, just make the car drive in a safe way. Now they have no advantage in Tesla, of course, having more data than anyone else in the world for driving cars. But you can also argue the same for large language models, that they simply train on a very, very simple objective as well, which is just produce the next word.
Yeah.
And given that very simple objective, it seems to emerge these kind of high-level cognitive functions on top of it. Now the question is, can you do it in a more efficient way? I think yes.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, and I would be very surprised if they're not doing it.
What do we think those topics are that sort of makes it more efficient?
It's hard to say when a lot of the research is closed.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
so that's one. On the Andreessen Horowitz summit that I mentioned, Sam Altman was there, and he was talking about hallucination, and he said LLM hallucinations. Within a year, that won't be a problem.
So they're starting to figure out how to deal with it.
I guess so. Yes. I don't see him as an Elon Musk sort of in promises. He seems to be a more down to earth. So I think the sort of higher cognitive function that we're seeing, they're an emergent property that we're sort of haphazardly unexpected, sort of the bigger model, and suddenly you get some new capability. I think that, and one other thing that he was going on about is that they are getting good at predicting their rate of innovation and the sort of emergent properties. Which, if that is the case, then you would expect them to steer it to something more purpose-built than predict the next word. Well, it is really talking about sort of biases, for instance, in data. And why, what that model really wants is not to solve a problem, but what's optimized is to predict the next word. It just wants to come up with a reasonable text coming after your text. And that has like a bunch of weird secondary implications.
I think, an interesting analogy here is if you take the stable diffusion approach versus the other generative image models before that, like DALL-E or whatnot, they worked on pixel level. They worked on the low-level abstraction of pixels, just as actually large language model does today, working on word level. Yeah. What Stable Diffusion did was move that into latent space, saying, we're not going to try to generate pixel by pixel, like large language models are doing by word. Instead, we're going to operate in this kind of latent space where you have some kind of high-level abstraction of what an image is. And then you, in that high-level abstraction, are you're instead trying to generate that image. Now, this I think is much closer to what Jan LeCun is speaking about, and also this kind of Kahneman, type 1 and type 2 system, where you start to have some kind of high-level reasoning instead of this kind of low-level reasoning. And once I think, I'm speculating now, of course, but once we are starting to see language models that operate in latent space instead of this kind of predicting words, I think we will see significant advantages that will also reduce the size of the models.
Yes.
That make them, work in much more smaller sizes with same level of quality.
Can I steal a topic that I cannot? I'm going to try to put a topic on the table that I can't even frame myself. So I will direct you to a topic, and you need to frame it for me. Through the summer, there has been more and more articles on ideas on changes in fundamental AI architecture in relation to how you separate the different steps, or you're trying to do all the steps in one go. Do you understand what I'm talking about now? Daniel Lankilde, for instance, said, I've been working on an idea, what I've learned on how you build AI systems and how you separate how the model works first with, and the latest papers has been around how you kind of do more of the steps in the same go. Do you understand what I'm talking about? Or is it too far away? I can't frame it because I don't technically know how to...
It's really... I can add on general sort of architecture improving things. I remember when Måns, my co-founder, and me were university studying a computer science course, and we had this task of like building a spline generator.
Spline, like some kind of curve.
Yeah. And we sort of, it sort of worked but didn't, and it took so long to debug because it was enough to do it okay, right, and still get a result. And typically with these neural networks, when you come to neural networks, they are super robust. So you can do it in a very inefficient way and you still get results. And the question comes like, when is the time to optimize? Is it now, or perhaps we can push this current LLM a bit further? So I think one big unexplored area that looked very promising but hasn't really developed is sort of LLMs calling LLMs, sort of auto GPT stuff, where you try to use an LLM as a higher order system. So the question is like, are we at the stage now where we should be going for optimization, or should we push on a bit more?
Yeah, it's getting closer to the singularity then, right?
Yeah.
So you give up control and you're saying, let the AI control the construction of AI in some way.
Yes.
It's a bit scary.
It is, yeah, and it doesn't work very well. It's sort of, it hits the limitations of GPT-4 today, which still sort of really, and this is not just this is not AI propaganda, but it's really, it's human plus AI combination that works today. Sort of solo, it's still too limited. It's still too easily get stuck into things. It's still, and that becomes evident when you try to get the GPT-4 to play the part of the human in the.
Yes, great point.
Can I just try to? I'm going to try. Before we jump into the next topic, let me just frame the topic I said. So this is Daniel Lankilde. You guys know Daniel, right? Yeah. Well. He made a nice post. Where, provocatively, I think the era of perception is ending. Embodied AI product have relied on perception, prediction, and planning as distinct layers for years. Now the next dimension, blah, 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 blah. We are now entering a new paradigm based on end-to-end connected neural networks that are all trained simultaneously, fully differentiable.
That was the Peltarian slogan back
now,
end to end.
Because this architectural story has been going on for years, and a lot of papers is right now.
What he's writing about there is exactly what Anders was talking about version 12 of the Tesla.
This is the Tesla. This is the Tesla story, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And do we think that because I think this has come up more to the surface in papers and stuff like that right now.
Absolutely, as far as you can do it in a stable fashion and sort of you get it to work. So yes, of course, it's much better to rather than trying to guess parameters and.
But you need a large number of GPUs, right? And that was the problem with end-to-end before. You had to trade it separately because of limitation in hardware.
It can be unstable, especially when you go to multiple modalities, when things get different orders of magnitude, and you get all sorts of numerical scaling problems and so on.
Yeah. But now Elon has bought every H100 GPU on the market.
We haven't touched the GPU topic.
I was about to say that was one of the topics.
That's one of the topics.
I could have discussed the GPU shortage. But I feel I have to say it's really interesting to hear this because I've been getting research papers and talking about neuro AI and everything that Jan LeCun and these guys are pushing and it's very interesting, but it's on a very high abstraction level, at least for me, to actually get a grip of it. Like neuroscience, artificial intelligence, all of this, and it feels like we're not talking about it a lot right now. Not a lot of investments are going there, but still these researchers are pushing it. I don't know, you guys as practitioners, how you perceive that dialogue regarding neuroscience and neuro AI.
So I'll ask. I'll pose the answer to your question as a question to Anders.
Okay.
What's your feeling about Jan LeCun being the new Jürgen Schmidhuber?
I forgot that.
So I mean, yes, in theory, but what we've seen in general in deep learning that it's the practical stuff that works. Transformers are not super advanced models, but they are easily parallelizable on GPUs. It really works. And there are much more clever models than what we're using. There have been for a long time. I mean, Anders, you've been in this field a long time. Do you remember sort of just plain vanilla MLP neural networks, the more advanced second order methods and so on, that never really went anywhere in the end. But we use the most simple step function in step learning.
But isn't this like the next gen AI? Like we are going to move, I don't know if that's the direction or some other direction, but we're not going to stay here. We're going to get new hardware. We need to push forward.
Yeah, but the question is if the sort of software follows a hardware development curve rather than vice versa.
Yeah, fair enough.
I think we will see significant improvements in both architecture from a model point of view, software and hardware. Yeah. And I think when the hardware comes, it's not really economical today when it comes to neuromorphic computing. But once it does, I think the software will follow and we will see significant improvement. But that's just me speculating.
No.
The time is flying in.
Let's go here.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. You want to take a topic perhaps?
Yeah. No, we're looking here at the investment landscape and the different layers. And it's interesting to see where the capital is going because if you simplify a lot, you have on the investment side, you have the application layer. So that's literally companies building new applications to enhance productivity. It can be sales productivity, marketing productivity, or HR, whatnot. Then you have the foundation, or then you have the orchestration and MLOps, where you help companies deploy LLMs or ML models. And then you have the model level, which is the new foundation models. What we naturally know is that building new foundation models is very capital intensive. You need a lot of GPUs and you need to raise like Mistral AI 100 million euros in your seed round right away just to buy the GPUs and get the data to train a new model. So it's really arbitrage in many ways to NVIDIA there when you do that. But the majority of the capital is naturally going to the application layer. And I think, what I'm looking at now is it's not the LLM per se, which is very interesting. It's more, how these startups and the founders understand the end users. If you're building, take Harvey AI. So they're building it's LLM based, but it's literally a software application that augments the work of a first, second year associated law firm. Really basic stuff, due diligence, whatnot. And what they have there, for example, is really interesting because one of the founders is a former lawyer, the other one is from DeepMind. So they both understand the domain and they have the technical.
That's the point.
Exactly, and that's interesting naturally. But however, if you look at cycles, investing cycles, and everything. So, for example, when we had the smartphone revolution, the biggest companies didn't come right away on the application layer when the first smartphone was launched. So take Airbnb, Instagram, all of these companies. They came 2 to 3 years after the smartphone came to market. And in many ways, I can see the same thing going on now. Like, I think it's pretty naive to think that the biggest application layer companies that utilize LLMs, but at the end of the day, the value they bring is how they package everything, how they solve the problem. It's not about the LLM underneath. It's how the UX is, how they integrate into the workflows and everything. And in many ways, what I see now is the gold rush with VCs. Everybody wants to invest.
Some new ideas. I mean, a lot of the companies like Airbnb, or for that instance, for King, where mobile was the big thing, was when you suddenly could, instead of sitting in a browser by a fixed computer, could have your game with you. So the mobile phone enabled a new type of usage, and I think also I completely agree that we're not seeing the sort of big things yet.
No, exactly.
I think they're going to be when people figure out what this is and how to use it.
Exactly, and I think Matt Miller from Sequoia invests a lot in dev tooling, in data infrastructure, ML infrastructure, and everything. And at the end of the day, he said it well. Like, they invest in founders and companies who understand their end users really well and have arbitrage there. Like, they've been former lawyers and they can get a technical co-founder with them, or former sales leaders, and see these problems. That's at the end of the day the only thing that matters. What we're seeing now with VC spending is naturally that everybody wants to jump on a application layer company which has a okay team. And naturally what will happen is there will be a lot of crash and burn, a lot of capital will be burned. But then in 2 to 3 years, I think we're going to get the big ones.
So bottom line, what is the problem worth solving, and how you really package that all the way, and then understand fully how to embrace the technology for that purpose is still going to be the recipe.
It's still the same simple things. That's the fun thing. Like, with the hype now, it's still the same fundamental things when you start a company. Like, you need to find a problem, you validate the problem, and then you gather a team that they can execute on the problem. The LLM is an enabler underneath.
Yeah, and all of a sudden you can rethink how you do it, and you can 10x the experience based on this. But you need to figure out the problem first.
The question is, what happens when your sort of value add on top is like a tiny bit compared to the value add provided by
the foundation model.
And that's really interesting. I think, talking from an investor perspective, what is really fun to look at cycles. So consumer-facing apps break through much faster. So take, ChatGPT, boom, 100 million users in a few months, like this. But B2B apps take much longer. And Luka, naturally, this, founding a B2B company where you want to enable something. And I can see the same there, that, the adoption wave hasn't really started yet in enterprises when it comes to startups building B2B applications which have LLMs underneath to enable it. We're still very much in the beginning there.
Yeah. There are tons of startups doing that, but it's like it's a jungle, and everybody is like super early on, so it's very hard to make a bet on. Like,
exactly.
Could I take another angle on this? Because one is the change that will happen because of generative AI in the startup world. But another angle is on the enterprise side, and perhaps not enterprise, but rather tech giants. I think, what we have seen in the last half a year, what Microsoft had done in actually building and upgrading their products, doing the co-pilot thing in both the browser, in the operating system in Windows, throughout the Office suite of products, and doing that in a couple of months is one of the fastest, product updates I've ever seen. Yeah. Now we're seeing Google doing the same in workspaces, and everyone else is like upgrading their products to make use of generative AI. Do you agree that this is one of the fastest product updates we've seen?
Yeah. No, 1%.
And I think it's a combination of two things. One is obviously the bet that they're making. Like, they're just like, this is the next big thing, so we're going to go all into it. Yeah. But the other thing is that it's scary easy to do.
Yes. Good point. I was thinking the same.
Yeah.
You have this API and you just throw things at it and magic.
It's super generic in some way. You can actually put everything as text in some way, potentially as image as well. But so many things can be formulated as text. Yeah. And you can put it into a language model and it can actually do something with it.
Add value right away.
It's surprisingly generic.
And it's very tangible, the value.
Yeah.
You can see it right away in your workflows. But I think what is interesting to see also the dynamic there, naturally the large incumbents are, like we said, the development cycles are really fast to incorporate this. But at the end of the day, like I think ChatGPT Enterprise is a good example. It's like, they have the same problems. If you're not Google or Microsoft implementing this in their own products, they don't need to go to procurement there. Yeah. But like OpenAI has the same challenge. Like they need to be able to actually get big enterprises to use these products. And
yes, no, they're owned to 50% by Microsoft, so it's sort of...
It helps.
It helps.
Yeah, definitely. If you're a Microsoft house already, it helps in buying. But what is really interesting to see is the larger companies. Now, when we're talking about these development cycles for the large players, how they're incorporating. So when we look at really big companies who have knowledge bases, they have a lot of data and a lot of good knowledge bases also, how they're not looking to buy something, they're building themselves. So McKinsey, for example, they build their own now McKinsey GPT that they're utilizing now internally. All their consultants are using it, and it's genius. Think about it. They have quite a lot of presentations and analyses the consultants have made, stored somewhere, indexed somehow, that they can utilize, and they have the capital, they have the brain power to build it themselves.
Similar with the Bloomberg GPT.
Yeah, exactly.
Bloomberg GPT is a good example.
I'm not sure yet how sort of good that is. I mean, if you compare it to using the best model there is combined with a fairly big context and then a vector database to store stuff.
Yeah. Well, I think from a B2B SaaS, and I invest a lot in B2B SaaS companies, that's naturally one aspect who do you sell to? And selling to these large companies is quite hard because let's be honest, because development cycles are so fast, they can see the results, they have vector databases, they have knowledge bases, they actually do it themselves instead of buying. And if we come down to the whole build versus buy conundrum, which is in the startup world the basic thing.
But it's also now sort of having switched from the startup to the enterprise side. The buy side is super attractive.
Yeah. Because
if you're going to build, especially when something comes this fast that doesn't fit in. So to build these applications, you don't need machine learning engineers.
No. You need developers or software engineers.
Yeah. And so you need to set up a new organization. You have to get allocate resources and budget for hiring. So in the end, it's like, let's just buy it.
Yeah.
Or you can do like King did and buy a company.
Exactly. That's one option also.
Acquisitions. I believe a lot of the sort of enterprise search companies are going to end up that way. They're going to have some customers that they're working closely with, and then when sort of the market becomes too competitive and the bigger player, then they're going to be acquired by that company that they're working with. That's a good way of...
I have a short question. Can we move in a little bit, like maybe it's a little bit local, but can we think about and discuss updates or something we saw over the summer that is on a more Nordic perspective? Nordic level, yeah. Can we think about anything?
One obviously is, I think, the Silo AI and
yes. Let's talk about that.
And the Silo Gen, and they are going to build the largest open source language model in the world.
Yeah.
In Europe.
In the world.
In the world, in Europe.
Okay.
I mean, like with the European values, maybe.
Potentially. What's your thought about that? And Oliver, you have a lot of insights here, I think, as well.
I naturally know Peter and Tero and Ville well, who founded Silo AI, and it's interesting to see how they are progressing, especially after Altor came in as an investor. And they essentially split Silo AI into two companies now. They have the consulting business, which historically has been very focused also on researchers and PhDs, and now they have Silo Gen, where they're building. And at the end of the day, you look at, I've been talking with investors a lot who are gonna, reap the biggest benefit, economical benefit in the coming 2 to 3 years from this boom. And there's a consensus that it's gonna be consulting companies. Mm-hmm. And there we come once again down to the buy versus build aspect of things. Like you can also do something in between, where you take in a outside consultant to build it together with you, taking the budget and building it and maintaining it also. And I think, everything in this life is about timing. I think Silo AI is naturally right in the right place at the right time right now. Can they execute? let's see. I hope so. Naturally, we need more Nordic power players in this. They have big ambitions.
Do right? I mean, in that sense, it's really good.
In this sense, it's we need all what we can get that becomes sort of a European players or Nordic players. I think so.
Yeah, 100%. And I personally, I just went in as an advisor investor in a data engineering consulting company, which is growing really fast, profitable, bootstrapped and everything. And I can see, this playing out, that it's not only about startups building products and selling in. It's actually consulting companies now who are growing fast, because a lot of larger enterprises, they might want to go, route in between, in build versus buy, where they take in a company who can build a platform and maintain it for them after it, and they own the IP.
Yeah, there is. I think especially when you come to the enterprise space, is that, like, say that you're using sort of standard thing, using GitHub, using Atlassian for stuff and so on. Yes, you can buy a third-party connector for each of these.
Yeah.
But then you still have to have some sort of nexus at the end, something that connects it all and that makes it sort of your company unique thing. And I think that there is space exactly between that.
Yeah. Definitely. And you want to do quite a lot of tailoring. Like, we're talking fine-tuning, prompt engineering, using RAG, whatever you're going with. And there, you might need the flexibility of a services company who can come in and actually do it for you and maintain it for you and actually make it so it, like Luka said, it fits your company perfectly. And I think their Salo AI is well positioned. And I like companies with big ambitions. I think we need more of that. And
absolutely.
You need to be able to say out loud, this is our ambition, like be a bit un-Nordic in that sense.
But and let's expand a little bit more on the AI update, because here we have taken a focus on Gen AI, because that's all the news around there. But we all know in this room that you need really good plumbing, and the plumbing needs to go hell of a lot better if you want to accelerate with AI. Yeah. So I'm talking about data engineering, but more importantly, all the trends that has been, in my opinion, since spring, and through summer, on all the different things of how we need to start sort of productizing and making our data engineering more robust. We have topics like how do we do data governance or AI governance by design? So how don't we do it as an afterthought, but how do we actually generate the practices or engineering data ops and all that? So can we say anything about the trends or updates, or what happened over summer on the plumbing side that helps the AI community? What's the trend here?
Good question. Adding Gen AI too.
That is actually one part, right? One part is that we're getting more intelligent with data lineage, as an example.
That's one thing. And at the end of the day, like, there was this discussion, will, Gen AI, kill data engineering, which is very naive to say. It's not going to kill data. No. It's to the contrary. It's going to put more pressure on it. It can do basic SQL. It can do the boilerplate stuff. End of the day, you need to connect everything to the real world and to that company's reality that company is in. And I think, LLMs are going to be a blessing for data engineering. They're going to do a lot of, the things exactly that they don't want to do, so they can focus more on the true value adding stuff. And I think that's still playing out very much.
One sort of thing that sort of interesting experience going from Peltarion and the customers that we had there, and then coming to King, where the customers that we were dealing with was mostly in the Swedish more traditional industry that have had various digitalization efforts and so on, and comparing that to a company that's been digitally native and where data-driven native. I mean, it's just such a massive difference, and it's sort of, and on the AI side, one of the things that we at Peltarion are thinking about, and also what we're thinking about at King, is like how do you make AI a core technology across every team? Most companies that we dealt at Peltarion time were struggling on the data side.
Yeah.
And then I look at sort of King, how does that work? Sort of, I mean, the people that were working there 10 years ago, most of them are not working there now. So how is that data capacity added, that data skills? And I don't have a really good answer. It's some form of diffusion. like you start working at a department that already has it established, and then you inherit, sort of learn from the others, and so on.
This starting point is, in my opinion, almost what is lacking in the analog company. So basically, they have such a hard time because there is nothing to build on. So they are fumbling for the first pieces of the puzzle.
Exactly. Getting that working, I don't have like a good answer of how to get there, but I feel that's more crucial than which tools you use and so on.
100%.
So we're coming back to some simple thoughts that I have friends who say data engineering and all this is not technology, it's a practice. And that's what you're now referring to, that when you come into King, the guys that established that practice from scratch and had the opportunity to bootstrap something that has sort of, that they have a grip on it from the beginning, and then the grip has grown, but the team has grown as well. And now we have an enterprise that is thrown into this. And they have no grip. And that's the practice. It's not the technology.
Exactly. And I think, I've been talking with probably 200 data teams and data leaders. And you can put companies in like 3 main buckets. You have the data, informed. So these are companies who maybe, have a data warehouse. It's batch data maybe once a day, and they use it a bit to inform some decisions. Then you have the data-driven companies. And data-driven companies are already at a stage where they might have some real-time pipelines. They, are ready to actually utilize AI and ML. It's not only BI, but then you have the data-led companies, and they make automated decisions with the data. And in Europe and in Nordics, I'd say 80%, 70% are still, in many ways, quite data-informed.
I would agree.
And data-driven, maybe 20%, and then there's like 5 to 10%. King might be one of those who are data-led, who automate decision-making with data. And I think the interesting thing here is, like, with the generative AI hype, what I always say is that, guys, you need to get your shit in order.
Get your plumbing together.
Yeah, exactly. Get everything in order.
It is. And especially, I think also, especially for the Gen AI thing, you can always throw that on productivity, which doesn't require sort of that bit. But the big value that's in traditional machine learning, my God, what a difference it makes when the organization
has a grip on the plumbing.
Exactly. Then you just have an endless amount of use cases that you can just solve very quickly. And
because and then there's the difference. We can talk about the distance from data to value. And if you have no plumbing and if you have no practices, it's a little bit like I did the analogy sometime. If I want to set up a paint production shop, with oil paint. Imagine if I had to go to the North Sea and drill for oil and pump it all the way through, or I have a refinery where I can build the lubricant that I need to put in the paint. And it's a little bit like that distance is humongous when you don't have your plumbing in order, so you can't reuse.
Yeah, 100%.
Of course, depending on sort of what trajectory you think, it might make sense, to wait a bit and get the next generation of GPTs or whatever it will be, and then let it solve the digitalization problem.
Speaking about that, the time is flying by here, so perhaps ending with some more philosophical kind of questions and taking this question about engineers, data engineers, or whatever kind of engineer you can think of, perhaps software engineer in general. Some people are saying, I think it was, I don't remember who, said that in 5 years, software engineers will not be needed or not be as important anymore, because you can simply use AI to do the coding, at least to a large extent. Perhaps not the practice, perhaps not put it in the context, perhaps not thinking of the business value in general, but at least the coding part can be automated to an increasingly more efficient way. Would you agree with that?
I would say that coding will change. Right now, we use this unintuitive way of trying to get a computer to do, digital computers to do the things that we want. I think it will change. On the whole, sort of, you can draw it a bit further. You can say like, okay, coding is automated. Why not product management, right? Why not company strategy? Why not running the company?
Why not put an AI as CEO, right?
Exactly.
Why not the lawyer kind of work, drawing up some contract or whatnot?
Yeah,
exactly. I think for most crafts, for most sort of professions, that there's going to be in the short term at least, a massive benefit to learning these things and essentially go with it to increase your productivity and go sort of.
But what have we learned from history? When do you have paradigm shifts in technology? I mean, like the jobs didn't go away; they changed.
Yeah, exactly.
They reinvented the job, and the job definition was all of a sudden something else. A business controller is not the person who moves the data bits in Excel.
Yeah.
The business controller is the business navigator now.
Exactly.
And I think it's as simple as that.
Yeah, 1%. You look at the software engineer job. Sorry, Luka.
No, I said yes, unless you could follow exactly the chain that I built up. Is that you can, like, for every level you can imagine, like, but you can use the AI to do that.
But the argument, the debate then is that, well, to some degree it's true, right? But to some degree, actually, well, some kind of part of the job will be left. So that's the change of the job. Yeah. So I don't think, because if I follow your chain, I agree with that. The job, the way it was done, it will disappear. But what is the job instead, is my question.
Yeah, and we tie jobs very much to titles: software engineer, data engineer, ML engineer. Now we have the rise of the AI engineer, whatever that means. It's like hybrid versions of people, who might have different titles before. And one interesting trend that I've seen now is with the rise of LLMs, because, the whole ML workflow has changed a lot. Like, you have traditional machine learning and development workflow there and orchestration, everything. Then you have LLMs now. And deploying LLMs is, especially if you just take, an API from GPT, from OpenAI or anything else. But what we're seeing now, which is very interesting, is that software engineers are actually becoming a big part of the AI workflow. And that's only because of LLMs.
API beat.
Exactly. But then we have the AI engineer, which is created, how do you fine-tune the models? How do you put them into production? All of that stuff also. But software engineers are actually taking, right now when it comes to deploying LLMs, software engineers are doing a lot of the work, which is a new thing. And that's, once again, the work and the description is changing a bit. Like, you do new things, and will be called a software engineer in 10 or 20 years. I don't know. It might
but isn't that a good conclusion, basically, that even if you're a software engineer, you don't perhaps build AI system per se. You build the plumbing, you build the integration, you build the back end, you build the front end, you build whatever. Still, everyone can use AI at different levels. If it is building JavaScript front end or whatnot, or actually doing the business practice or doing a lawyer contract. Would you agree that everyone needs to at least understand and make use of AI at any level? Otherwise, they will be replaced by people that do use AI at any level.
Yes.
Yes, that is the truth. It's not a robot that will take you. It's not an AI that will take your job. It's a human using AI that will take your job.
It's a bit like
using a computer today.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's
exactly the same.
Right?
If you opted out from using a computer and you want to have your notebook, you are not so productive anymore.
I mean, like I have this joke. I made it on stage several years ago. I'm not sure it's politically correct, but it's a little bit like if you're rejecting technology. Let's say I'm rejecting technology. I don't want to be part of technology in society. How would you do that? What would you do that? And then actually, there are people doing that. There's even, you have the Amish people, as an example, in the US, who decides that this is not a good society. We are super happy. We drive around in our horses and carriages, and we have a manual agricultural society. But so essentially what we are saying is that to the people who are not actually, who's trying to reject this, in a sense, you're arguing for something that you can't be part of the larger society. That is what I'm trying to make that point with the Amish example.
I don't think they're rejecting technology. They're rejecting technology post 1890 or something.
Exactly. This is true.
Yeah. I think one interesting, there was an article a week ago on MIT Technology Review. So how one elite university is approaching ChatGPT this school year. Why Yale never considered banning the technology. And I think that's the interesting part now. And I think, who are progressive, who are not. So Yale is now more thinking, how do we incorporate this into the student's life? Naturally, you need to have some, frameworks in place, but they're not even thinking about banning it.
No, and I think that's good. And you have also I know Chalmers in Sweden.
Yeah.
Also, sort of has a you're free to use. You have to say that you use it, and if there were some critical prompts, you have to include them. So
Yeah.
So which I think is
I guess it's similar to the Blake versus Grimes music artist story. You know, Blake had this person that were abusing his voice and produced a song that became popular, and he made a lot of money as a fake Blake, and he sued him, and now he's producing another song, etc. And you can try to fight it, and then you can take the Grimes approach, the ex-wife of Elon Musk, and she, I had to say it.
How many times have you said Elon Musk today?
Connection when you can.
But she instead said, you know, you're free to use my voice, but I want 50% of whatever song you produce. And she made a lot of money from it. So I think
Exactly.
it's a similar approach, right?
But I think here when we talked about the, you know, AI doomers versus, and I think, you know, looking what Yale is doing and Chalmers and all the other ones, that's the way that inspires me.
Exactly.
That's the way where I feel actually we're making progress. We will learn how to regulate. We will learn how to, but we can't ban it. We need to start. And then on the go, a lot of the things, you know, that will need to be regulated will become evident as we start.
And there are so many societal benefits to be had with the technology as it is today. Some plumbing is needed.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you just look at healthcare, it's almost all administration costs.
Yes. Imagine the possibilities there.
Yes, exactly.
It's amazing.
And we can't solve it. Right now, I mean, all the reports in Sweden, we cannot solve it because we have people going in retirement, and at the same time the pressure goes up. So it's not physically possible to solve it. So I think, and sometimes when we have this extreme doomer discussion, it's like, well, isn't it like every decision you make, there is a risk.
Yeah.
There is no, it's like you said, zero risk doesn't exist. You can only manage risk, right? Mm-hmm. So it's in this context we need to do the right stuff.
And it's not really a lack of challenges and problems we have in the world.
No,
exactly.
We have so many things. So perhaps...
Yeah, no, at the end of the day, it's about, do you want to kill a risk or manage risk? And we need to manage risk. If we kill it, it won't work. It just won't work.
So perhaps one of the potentially final, or no, let's make it a final question, if we can. Are you worried or excited about I guess you agree that it's kind of an exponential power that AI is building up. Are you worried or excited about that? Let's start with you, Oliver.
I think the dynamics in the market are interesting because there's only so many companies right now. Like we touched upon the GPU shortage and everything, but there's so many considerations now, and there's only a few companies in the world who actually can execute on these things. You have the Googles, you have the Microsofts, etc. And I think one thing that concerns me as a European is just Europe and how much we are lagging behind. And it really irritates me and frustrates me because the AI talent is unbelievable in Europe. You look
really
at
good, right?
Yeah, you look at the whole Llama development team at Facebook. Essentially, their AI team, core, it's French. European. You look at, Google Brain and DeepMind merged now into Google DeepMind, and the whole AI development moved to London in Europe, and the list goes on. Hugging Face, French founders, like we have so much in Europe. But what a bit annoys me is that we don't have the companies in Europe right now who can compete and who can actually add a lot of flavors to this. It's driven from the US and partially China, but that's a different beast.
So it's the same problem as before. We really don't have the sort of it's the same as with the sort of data-driven, data-first company.
Yeah.
We don't have that center, that practice of venture capital.
Yeah.
And we're fractured. Which you would say, like today, it shouldn't matter that you're physically in the same space, but it does.
Yeah,
it really does.
1%, and that's talking a bit about Cell AI. It's that smaller scale than OpenAI or anything, but still it's nice. But we just need to up our game in Europe. We have everything. Like we have the brain power, we have the capital. Actually, it's more how we deploy it and actually how we execute on this now. And the window is now. If we wait 2 years. yeah, then we need to wait for the next big thing. And
as you say, it's not the lack of capital, but the sort of how you deploy that capital. That's the trick. The sort of big EU bets. There are lots of money that they're pumping, but essentially that goes to companies that are really good at writing EU request letters rather than. It's a hard problem.
The ones who can compete with OpenAI.
As an investor, Oliver, are you afraid that in 5-10 years there will be no use for manual human investors anymore?
No, not yet. Like, especially depends. I think late stage investments for sure. That will be automated to a large part, but especially early stage investing that I focus on a lot. It comes down to the people at the end of the day, the founders. And sorry to say, but no AI, a competitive early stage deal, if you deploy an AI to discuss with the founders or actually try to analyze the company, you don't get anywhere. Like you need that human-to-human interaction. That's the way it is. So I'm not concerned. Late stage where it's more of a numbers game, for sure. But at the end of the day, if it's a competitive deal and there's 5 investors who want to come in, once again, we come to the human factor, like who do I want to work with? Who are the people I feel are aligned with the vision we have for the company? So like everything, it will take away a lot of the boilerplate stuff and it's gonna, let us focus more on the stuff that actually matters, which is still driven by humans and understanding human motivations, understanding trends that the machine can't really understand, where you need to look at the environment as a whole right now, not any historical data that it's been trained on, but more what is happening in the world right now. So
do you think that will keep for 10 years as well?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I like I said, I think, stock market and all of that, that's a different and more mature companies, that's a different game. But it's still human driven to such a large extent. I'm not concerned. What I believe is, deal sourcing will change. How do you find companies that you want to invest in? I think there's a few VCs in Europe like Moonfire, Matthias Jungman, who work with Niklas Sennström at Atomico. They have a ML first approach into sourcing companies. How do you find the new investment opportunities that other people don't find? Utilizing, machine learning to do that. That's a big opportunity, I think, in deal sourcing.
And like EQT and Motherbrain, etc.
Exactly, all of this. So I think that's where the big, delta can happen. But you still then need to deploy a human when you find that opportunity. So I think AI will for sure, decide who's a winner as an investor, who's a loser. Yeah. But I still believe there can be some winners also in those who don't use AI but have really good intuition and networks. They can still get it. But I think that there's going to be a segregation in the investment world, those who utilize it and those who decide.
And in general, let's assume, just hypothetically, that there is super intelligence in 15 years that will be better than any human and all humans together as well. Would you be worried or excited about that?
That's a very philosophical. I haven't even thought about it. I guess I would be worried, but we're still humans. Like, we're gonna fuck up things somehow, and it's gonna require human intervention one way or the other. I'm not gonna. I wouldn't say I don't lose any sleep thinking about that. Yeah.
Luka, are you worried or excited about the exponential increase in power of AI?
Super excited.
Excited.
Yes.
Why are you excited?
So, I've been working with AI for I don't know how many years, 20 plus years, definitely. And this is sort of the hopes of what this would one day be. I thought would be much further ahead. I'm not surprised that sort of we eventually got here where we are today, but I expected this to be in 20 years.
I mean, it's so interesting to hear you because, when you were here on the pod and we discussed your journey and how you started way early on this topic before Peltarion and how it moved into Peltarion. And like, if you put yourself on the scale of, how exciting and, 2023 compared to any of those 20 years, the right now is crazy, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to put a number of it, but it's
like, exponential, right?
Yeah, it's order of magnitude.
Order of magnitude.
Exactly. It feels like we skipped a massive step.
Right, we leapfrogged.
There was some sort of leapfrog happening here, right?
Exactly.
I have an anecdote that I've used. So I can imagine this feels a bit like the moon landing for the younger generation in the 60s. like, holy shit, we're actually on the moon. We can do anything. Like, anything is possible. And I feel like my generation or our generation, we haven't really had that. And I speak for myself, but this felt a bit like the moon landing in a way when we actually leapfrogged suddenly. Like, Luka's worked for 20 years. I haven't worked for 20 years in this space, but still long enough to see a bit the struggle. And then suddenly we crossed the chasm everywhere. It's like everything is possible. At the same time, I always say also that, you know, when we went to the moon in 1969, NASA was already planning us going to Mars. It was like, in 10 years, we're going to be on Mars, you know, developing the technology, the plan to get there. Yeah, you look 50 to 60 years ahead, here we still are. And I've said, I know you guys don't like me saying, but I think it's a bit the same with the foundational LLM craze right now. Like, we landed on the moon, and now we're like, oh, we're going to go to Mars. There's a risk that we look 50 years back, we didn't go to Mars. We're still on the moon, and it's nice. Like, we use this everywhere. It has made the world a better place, like the technology that we used to develop, you know, the Apollo program. It's used in many places in society. But I might be wrong. But we have a tendency as humans to do this.
Yeah, I think it's sort of exact timeline predictions are hard to make because you're always affected by the way things are happening right now. Like, for instance, when around the time we were here last time, when GPT-4 was released, it was like almost hour by hour things were happening. And now we've reduced that expectation to like week by week or month by month, sort of that kind of. So yeah, yes, but I'm thinking like even if tomorrow the UN would come out and every country agrees we're stopping here, not a step further. What we have now
to really explore and innovate with, to adopt and innovate with. We have so much.
Yes, exactly.
And I think that's the thing which, you know, makes me so excited. What we have right now is enough. And then talking about the whole doomer, you know, everything will go to hell. I'm like, don't destroy this moment that we have now. And you shouldn't be naive, but still, like.
But it's an interesting thought that what we have right now, technology-wise, to take that from invention to innovation adoption, just what we have is a massive opportunity.
Yes.
Yeah. It is. And it's so exciting. Like, I couldn't be happier to be where I am today and where we are. I feel very inspired all the time about the possibilities.
But okay, invention done, now the work starts.
Exactly.
To get it to innovation and adoption.
Of course, we'll never get it this easy because the innovation or invention continues. So meaning that sort of the stuff that we are talking about today may not be valid within a year because sort of things will be shifted.
I would love to fast forward and sit here in a year and look back what we talk now.
But this is the time capsule that the whole idea that if you ask Goran, you know, why did we start this podcast? One angle of it is to make a time capsule in this point in time. And it's going to be super interesting to when you look at these episodes, and we can have your episode from the first time you were here as a Peltarian episode. Yeah. We have your second episode when you were hour by hour tracking GPT. And now we have this. Imagine this in 10 years. Yeah. It's going to be interesting to watch and see how it played out, right?
Yeah, 1%. And I think in 1 year, my prediction is I'm finished, so I'm always a bit negative, I guess. But I think we're going to have a massive hangover in a year. We're like, like a lot of good things happen, but we could have gone a bit faster.
No, this will boil down to, and I said it on the DARE Awards, we have a problem which is not a technology problem. We have an organizational problem. How do we infuse AI in the DNA of the core DNA of our companies? And this is the struggle, how it flips, how we innovate, how we organize, how we steer. And we did some tracking, you know. We talked about the fourth industrial revolution and fifth industrial revolution. Can you really talk about a revolution that is sort of implying a cycle of 30 to 50 years when the innovation pace is months? Yeah. You know, so all of a sudden it's a mind shift game that the corporates are not used to organize for. And I think that is what's holding us back. It's not the invention part, it's the innovation.
Oliver, to your thing is that you're in the VC startup space. Large enterprises, they're coming next year. Yeah. They are building up now. Everybody's we have to do this, and now they're starting to make budgets and invest, sort of allocating massive amounts of money for exactly this. So
amazing. No,
Exciting times.
It makes me really happy to hear it, because at the end of the day, that is the big thing when we get this rolled out in the big companies, because the big companies employ the masses, and that's...
And why I think this will work, unlike the sort of more traditional AI, because it's so easily implementable.
Yeah.
It's for the same reason that Microsoft can roll these things out.
The big companies can also, yeah. As long as they get their shit together and their data foundation and everything, then they're ready to go.
Even no data, just for helping them write emails.
True. No, you have a good point. Then transcribing meetings and everything. It's true. But I still advise them to do both in tandem.
Of course, sort of enterprise knowledge management. That's a big thing coming.
Yeah.
I'm at least certainly very glad to be part of this time. I think this year, if nothing else, I think will go down to one of the most innovative years that we've seen, and with the massive inventions coming time to time. But also this small evening, sitting here with the, let's say, post-summer podcast again with so awesome guests that we have, Luka, Oliver, and Evelina, wherever you are. So I'm very happy with that, and I hope you can stay on a bit longer as well for some afterward podcast discussions. But I'm super glad for that, and I hope we'll have as exciting times coming hours and years.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the season, Anders.
Yes.
There's some cool stuff happening.
Awesome.
And Goran, I would like for you in this episode to add an Elon Musk counter that you like.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't think AI can count that time.
Awesome.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you
so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.